Welcome to the Free Cities podcast. My name is Timothy Allen, and this is the official podcast of the Free Cities Foundation. Welcome to episode number 5 of the Free Cities podcast. Today's episode is much longer than usual, and that's because basically it's just 3 friends sitting around the kitchen table having a natter, as we say in the UK. I'm in El Salvador talking with Tom and Emily Lahdenranta. Now, a phrase I've been hearing quite a lot in the Free Cities world is vote with your feet. It's a simple concept that boils down to something along the lines of go to where you're treated the best in the world. Well, in Tom and Emily's case, they made the ultimate move, selling their house and possessions in British Columbia and moving with their 3 young children to Central America. Their move to a better life was eventually triggered by Canada's strict COVID-19 restrictions, which meant that, amongst other things, Emily was fired from her nursing job on account of her choice not to take the COVID-19 vaccination. This situation, combined with what they considered to be the unacceptable and increasingly authoritarian trajectory of their own government, compelled them to leave their home country for Mexico, beginning a quest to find a place in which they felt they had the freedom to raise their family in the manner to which they aspired. Well, over a year later, that place has turned out to be El Salvador, and we spend most of this conversation talking about the path that brought them to this point, as well as the trials and tribulations of life as a COVID refugee. Tom and Emily are both hugely inspirational people for me, and I was extremely thankful to finally sit down with them and listen to the full story of their journey. If you are someone who finds themselves in a similar situation, then I would urge you to reach out to them, since they are a true treasure trove of information on what it takes to make a very bold move like this successful. In the meantime, I would like to wish those of you that celebrate at this time of the year a very happy Christmas indeed, and it just leaves for me to say sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Tom and Emily Lahdenranta. I'll start because I've got my own version of this story, which is I was living in El Salvador with my family, and we met you one morning on the beach. I distinctly remember because you were having surf lessons, and
Oh, that's right.
We had I was sitting in that great restaurant that we just ate in today again, which on a beach called El Palmacito, which is a phenomenal beach near El Zonte, but completely different to El Zonte, a completely different vibe. And we rented an Airbnb there. It turns out you were renting an Airbnb nearby, and we met on the beach and hit it off. And we ended up spending a lot of time together before we eventually left, because we were carrying on our travels. And you left shortly after that, but you've come back, and now you're actually getting residency in El Salvador, on account of the fact that you've left Canada because of the current political situation in Canada, and which we'll go into later. And that's what we're going to talk about today. There's just everything involved with that procedure, and how it takes a toll on you, and how it's good, how it's positive, how all these things. Is that how you remember it? Do you remember meeting us on the beach that time?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, now that you mention it, our girls were doing a surf lesson, and I remember just walking and thinking, "Oh, there's other tourists here." And there was actually a German lady who you and I were speaking. We just met.
I came up to you on the beach, and I don't normally do that. In honesty, I'm quite nervous about approaching random people. I've got much better at it. You know, and then even on that trip, I got better at it. But I actually came up to you and sort of like tapped you on the shoulder and said hi or something, which is really unusual for me.
And I think you mentioned that because you saw that we had kids the same age as your
Exactly.
kids, and you thought, you know, playmates for our kids.
Well, yeah, we do. Our kids are all roughly the same ages. You've got 3 girls. I've got 2 girls and a boy, but they were,
all about the same age.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember your girls playing in the water, and our girls came over, and we introduced ourselves to them.
There are so many similarities between our lot and your lot. Even I've noticed here. I'm staying at your house at the moment here in Zaragoza, and I've noticed the way they play is very similar to the way my kids play, because we have a very close knit family as well. They spend all their time together, and they're very self sufficient in play. Like, they don't have a huge amount of toys, and they didn't when we were traveling. They were allowed one small bag each, which forced them to just create stuff constantly. And I noticed that about your kids. Everything they were playing with, apart from the Lego, which is a creation process in itself, everything else was kind of stuff they botched together themselves.
Hair elastics.
Do you think I'm picking up on something, or are all kids like that?
I think often when they are given the chance, like when they have less to play with, and they are more creative in some ways.
Yeah, it's funny because it reminds me. I remember my dad telling me when he was a kid that they didn't have any toys, and so he would make farm animals out of pine cones and sticks, and I see that with kids when they don't have, you know, if you give a kid a tablet or a remote control car or something like that, then they play with those kinds of toys. But if those aren't there, then they have an opportunity to, what can I create? What can I make fun out of these simple things that I have? And
especially tablets, because tablets do most of the hard work for you. Same with films. When you watch a Disney movie now, it's so overly produced. It's basically creating your imagination for you, isn't it? There's no room for even imagining with them.
Yeah.
Or your average, even adult films, like you know, there's so much technologically advanced filmmakers can make so much now. You don't even think about anything. And you go back and watch a film from the 70s, or even something like, you know, Jaws. You know, do you remember the film Jaws?
Yeah.
You never see Jaws in the beginning, and that's the fun of it.
Yeah.
These days, if you did the Meg, or that film The Meg about that giant shark, you know, it's all CGI, and it's far less scary because it just looks like it doesn't leave anything to the imagination. And I think your kids, like mine, are super involved in all that kind of stuff. So we're at your house here in Zaragoza. You came to El Salvador. You were in Mexico. Why don't you talk through the little timeline first of all? I tell you what, go back right to the start, because you were just, I suppose I'd call you a run-of-the-mill family in Canada. Is that right?
Yeah, in some ways, I think.
But like I would have met you like I met you on the beach. You were just a family. I wasn't thinking, wow, these are crazy, freedom-loving patriots, or I don't know, whatever.
Oh.
You know,
I have to say that if you knew me well, you would know I had a libertarian bent, a libertarian mind. I was very much thought people should be allowed to live as they please, and as long as they're not harming others. I've had that philosophy for 20 years. But yes, I think if you would have met us, you would have thought there's a regular Canadian family with, they work, they're part of the community, they send their kids to school.
Well, Emily, you were a nurse, right?
Yes.
And Tom, you're a software guy, or
an accountant, actually.
Accountant. Well, there you go. That's pretty normal.
Yes.
An accountant and a nurse. I'd say you're kind of.
But we wanted to travel with our kids. That was something we'd always talked about, because we had traveled together before we had kids, and I had traveled a lot in my 20s, and so we had always had this dream of traveling with our kids. So that was there. So
that is something to keep in mind, I guess.
Yeah.
That it's not like we were just a Canadian family that had never thought about going to Latin America or Mexico or El Salvador. Emily and I went on a 7-week trip across Central America about 10 years ago, before we had kids, and we really enjoyed that trip. We always had fond memories of this part of the world, and we knew that it wasn't that scary, although now having 3 little girls, thinking about it, it was a lot more scary. The unknowns and, how that would go with little kids. Yeah.
The what?
Chicken buses in Mexico.
That's like the old school buses from the United States they use for public transportation here.
Everybody brings their chicken.
Yeah.
So we took those, we did all that when we were younger without kids. We traveled chicken buses but we knew that, coming here with little kids, it would be different. And it was intimidating. But I just wanted to, mention that we had traveled to Latin America. We'd learned Spanish, a fair bit of Spanish 10 years ago. We studied for a few years. And so because of that, when things started to go downhill in Canada, I do think it was a little bit easier for us to think about the possibility of leaving and going somewhere else, like to Mexico. But yeah, so to tell our story, we were living normal life, and just like everyone else, I guess, when the COVID stuff started, and I think like most people, we were sort of uncertain of what to believe, what was happening. But there's a lot of fear, and we were fearful too at the beginning. Didn't know how serious this was, and so for the most part, I went along with what we were told to do, and tried to follow the rules.
Yeah, and I remember specifically going into work almost daily because Tom was in between jobs when COVID hit. He was forced to wait for his next job to start. And I specifically remember one morning going to work thinking, I hope I'm not bringing COVID to work today. Because we were so fearful at that time that we actually thought anybody could be carrying it even without symptoms and spreading it or picking it up at work from some random person and bringing it home and killing their family. It was that much fear. And I remember living with that amount of fear when it came to this virus. And they were pumping it in the media, and...
Well, you, especially because you worked in an elder care facility, wanted to be cautious.
And I had to take a PCR test each time I had a stuffy nose, which is very unpleasant. But that's... Yeah.
But yeah, so to fast forward a little bit, like we were trying to just live our life and make the best of the situation up until about the summer of 2021, when we could see that the Canadian government and our province, British Columbia, was starting to introduce restrictions that, we didn't like where it was headed. So, they now announced that getting our freedoms back would be dependent on the percentage of population that got vaccinated. And so I forget what it was, 70% of people had to get it before they could, start giving us our freedoms back. And so right off the bat, we went, this doesn't look good. And, I remember the Prime Minister and the Chief Medical Officer in British Columbia both saying that they would not introduce discriminatory vaccine passports. That was not something that they were considering. And that was the spring of 2021. And then a few months later in the summer, they started saying how they're going to bring them in, and it was across Canada. So there's nowhere to run to get away from that, because we both made the decision not to get it. We didn't feel at risk at all from what we'd seen as far as studies and, risk factor for our age. We're both healthy adults, not.
Would you say, going back to taking the vaccine, would you say that in the beginning you thought, yeah, I'm just not going to take it? And it wasn't a huge problem until it was like mandated or it was coerced.
For me personally, I thought I have questions about this mRNA thing, and I'm not sure if I should take it, but I was very close. In fact, I was going back to the room to get the vaccine one day at work, and it just so happened someone else had taken the one dose that was left that day. And so that evening, I happened to get some information from my dad, and it made me start questioning everything about it. That maybe young, healthy people don't need this vaccine. Maybe our bodies can actually fight COVID, and since we have a 99% chance of not dying from it, maybe a vaccine is more risky. For us, that's how we started feeling. So
yeah, that sent us down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And I had already made the decision that I'm going to be the last guy to get this, because I've seen the stats for men under 40, very low risk. I just don't I don't like being told what to do. I don't like being pushed into things. So I'll be the last person to get this. And that was kind of the thought process I had. And so I thought, as long as they're not forcing this on people, that's fine. Everybody else can get it if they want. I don't feel at risk, so I'm not going to get it. But then it was when they started to say, we will take your freedoms away if you don't get this. You will not be able to travel. You'll not be able to go to restaurants. You'll not be able to take your kids to the swimming pool or the movie theater. That was when it started to get really scary. I remember we went on a 1-week camping canoe trip in this beautiful lake off the grid in British Columbia. It was like a paddle-only lake, so no motorboats. It was we went with my parents and my sister and her fiance at the time and our girls, and we canoed around this Myrtle Lake. And it was a beautiful trip, and it was just so peaceful. We were, completely disconnected from the media and the world. And I remember just feeling so refreshed and coming back, loving life and that experience of spending time with family and nature. And then I remember we turned on our phones as soon as we got cell service, and we're coming out of there, and we're looking at the Twitter and the news and our emails. And it's like Emily had an email from her employer, or they had announced that they were firing all nurses if they didn't have the vaccine by a certain date. There was a lot that we took in that first 30 minutes of just re-entering the world. They had announced, I think at the same time, that they were going to bring in the vaccine passport in British Columbia. So we wouldn't be able to go to public places. And so it was this big, huge wake-up call. It was like such a contrast from being in, this peaceful camping trip to now, we're taking all your freedoms away. And it was a quick dominoes to fall after that. So that was August. I think it was,
last year.
Yeah, August 2021. And then we left October 27th, 2021. So between that canoe trip and us leaving, things happened very quickly. I remember we had been thinking about this. We had seen little things coming along that made us concerned. And so we had applied for our girls' passports before that canoe trip. I remember distinctly dropping off the passport application in the mail just before we left on the canoe trip, like the day we left. And I remember thinking, I really hope we get these soon because I don't like where this is headed. And then when we got back from that trip, it was confirmation that was a good decision.
Mm-hmm.
And
we found out it was probably the very end of September or early October, we found out that soon we wouldn't even be allowed to fly out of Canada unless we were vaccinated.
Had you lost your job by this point?
I was told that that I would be losing it early October. So September was going to work, 3 times a week and getting a rapid test every time and working with other nurses who were in tears over this whole thing because they didn't want to get it, but they felt forced to. And then they would, eventually give in, all except for 3 of us. It started out with a couple dozen of us that didn't want it.
What was the general conversation amongst nurses at that time? Like, I'm interested to know what you were talking about. Were people were you getting a lot of pushback? Were you, were people?
I felt really privileged. I worked in a nursing home. We looked after about 60 residents, elderly people. And I felt like most people were open to the conversation that this should be a choice. Most people had the viewpoint that the vaccine should be a choice. And if you don't want to get it, you shouldn't be forced to. I felt lucky because I'd heard a lot of people talking about the hospital where, there's a lot of nurses and doctors saying, oh, you should just get it. You're selfish if you don't get it. But we had many conversations, especially, like there'd be a group of 4 or 5 of us nurses and care aides talking about, well, what if it makes, the young girls would say, well, what if it makes me infertile if I get it? I don't want to get this thing. Over my dead body will I get this thing, said one young woman. And, and then it came down to, well, you won't have a job. So she got it. And
I would almost certainly posit that there'd be a lot of pushback for your decision from people who would say, but look, you work in an old people's home. And even back there, at the beginning, it was like we now know it was a disease of old people and overweight people, I think is another way to look at it. But certainly old people.
Right.
And So, and we kind of knew, I mean, I remember back then trying to put together as much data as I could to work out what was going on, because I noticed the same thing that you did, that the freedoms were disappearing.
Yeah.
I didn't have an opinion on whether you should or shouldn't take the vaccine. I don't care, but I do care when freedoms get taken away.
Yeah.
And it was apparent back then that the only people that were at risk were very old people. So working you can understand people pushing back on you if you were working in an old people's home.
Yeah. I did have a few people say to me, well, you could be bringing this disease into this nursing home if you don't get it, and I did have a few coworkers, like I had to pick and choose who I talked to about it, obviously. So there was a few that would say things like, oh, I just don't want to talk about it. Like, you should just get it. And even my boss said, well, mRNA has been around for a long time. But not to this scale, right? So there was a lot of different opinions. Yeah.
And what is your opinion on that then? What is your opinion on, like I say, it's a compelling argument. If you work with old people, you should get the vaccination. That would even make sense to me. And, but obviously I don't believe in forcing anyone to do anything.
Right.
I remember something that I don't know if Emily remembers, but there used to be the option to get tested every day. And Emily had been doing that for a while. And when she went to work, she would get a rapid test, and that was good enough. And then they said that that's no longer an option. And so it's interesting that many places kept that option
Alberta.
For people, so that they didn't force you to get it, and because it had yet to be proven that it stopped you from spreading COVID. Which, funny enough, now having this conversation, we know, right? Looking back, we know. We didn't know all the facts back then, but it's interesting that we were being lied to about it then. And now Pfizer's admitted they didn't even test the vaccination for whether it would stop the spread. And so, I understand why people would say, like, oh, you work in an elder care facility, you should have to have this. But now looking back, it's like, no, it didn't actually stop it, because we've seen huge outbreaks in Canada and nursing homes since all the staff have been vaccinated in provinces where it was required.
That I agree with you on that one. Yeah. And I think a lot of people would say to that, well, you have the benefit of hindsight now. But that's not even true either, because back then in our community, like I call my community the Bitcoin community, what was being said about 2 months after the official kind of beginning of the pandemic has pretty much all come true. There was very high signal amongst Bitcoiners because we're so critical. We don't, it's always verify. There was, if someone tells me something, even they're my bestest friend, I still will smile, nod, and then go away and just check myself. I need to do and there was a lot of data that showed that wasn't actually the case. And that's why so many people decided, okay, maybe I'm not going to go for that. And that's fine, because I don't mind. I'm obviously choosing to help myself if I get a vaccination, which for me was always that. I thought that's what they were anyway. I thought you took vaccinations to protect yourself. In
the past.
Yeah, which was an interesting idea that this was. I mean, when looking back at it all now with hindsight, I would say that it's not really a vaccination. It's more like something to deal with the symptoms of COVID.
Yeah, some people were saying that back then. That's a treatment.
It's a treatment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And So okay. So you realized that you had lost your job, and you were basically both being told you wouldn't be able to fly, take public transport.
One of the worst things for us was that they were telling us you can't bring your kids to the swimming pool, you can't sign them up for gymnastics, you can't. And so we were sitting there in September 2021 looking at what the winter in Canada was going to look like, because we'd already been through the winter of the previous winter when all the restrictions were in. You couldn't get together with your family for Christmas, you couldn't go out to eat. There was that memory was strongly in our minds at the time. And we were looking and thinking, what is the next 6 months going to look like? We're not going to be able to do anything. Like maybe they were talking about banning you from outdoor places. And we were worried, like, are we even going to be able to go to the downhill ski? Yeah, they were banning people from downhill ski hills.
Really?
Yeah, like you had to have a vaccine pass to go to a ski hill. And so we were wondering, like, what can we even do as a family here? And we didn't want to be telling our girls for the next 6 months, we can't take you out for lunch. We can't take you to gymnastics. We can't take you to the swimming pool.
We had already spent over a month doing that, and it was torture.
Did they have any idea? Do you think your kids had any idea what was going on?
Yeah, we told them.
A bit.
We tried to be very honest with them about how wrong this was and how, we wanted to take them traveling around the world. We had been building up that idea for quite a while because we wanted them to not be surprised if we made the decision to leave. Emily and I were having private discussions about maybe we need to leave Canada. And so we were talking to our girls because we had for years wanted to travel as a family. And so we started bringing up this idea, like, well, we're gonna go around the world as a family. We're gonna go travel to different countries and maybe spend a year traveling around the world. And our girls were thrilled by the idea. We bought them a world map and we would mark all the places we wanted to go. And we bought a Lonely Planet travel guide and we would read about it, before bedtime and the different countries we wanted to visit. And so it was really fun and got them excited about it. And yeah, we would be open and honest with them about what was happening in Canada and why we were thinking about leaving.
So how did that conversation go when you finally said, right, I'm going to book some tickets? Like, how did that work? Because look, I'll be honest with you here, as someone who has, I've got a wife and a family, and I know that mine and Liz's risk tolerances are very different. I can do all kinds of stuff that Liz would feel very uncomfortable doing. So how did that conversation go?
Well, there's a bit of a lead up to it, but we can tell the story together. I think, but
the lead up's good.
But this is a good story. So I had been connecting with the Bitcoin community on Twitter. I had been shitcoining a little bit, investing in different cryptos and mostly Bitcoin. And I had been reading a lot of books like the Bitcoin Standard. And so I was getting closer and closer to becoming a Bitcoin maximalist, a Bitcoin believer. And so I had connected with all these Bitcoiners on Twitter. And I'd met several who were living in Central America, who had left Europe, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and were now living in either Mexico or Central America somewhere. And so I had started following these people and reading their posts. And they seemed to be enjoying life more where they were than where they had previously lived. And I thought, maybe we could do this. And so I started reaching out to these people, and I reached out to several of them to ask, how is it where you are? And thinking of taking my wife and kids, what do you think? And only one person got back to me out of the several people that I messaged. And it was a guy from New Zealand who was living in Mexico. And he was super helpful. He answered all my questions. And it was funny because he was in Playa del Carmen, where it was somewhere we had been on our trip to Central America 10 years earlier. And so I asked him about it. How is it? Like, how are the restrictions? What do you think about like bringing kids down there right now? And he really eased a lot of my fears. And so I had already sort of made the decision in my mind that I wanted to go. And I'd been talking to Emily about it. But I didn't want to, I had this guilt or this fear that I didn't want to push Emily to go and for her to be unhappy because of something I made her do or tried to push her into doing against her will. So I really wanted to go, and I would tell Emily like what I was reading, what I was seeing, who I was talking to, but I didn't push it on her, and I was afraid to make a decision. I was afraid to leave our home and all the logistics that went into it, and taking our kids out of school and all that stuff. I was scared.
And selling your house, right?
Yeah. But at that time, we had thought about renting it to my parents living there or renting it out. So different things were going through our mind. We hadn't made the decision to sell yet, but anyways, I was like paralyzed by wanting to go, but being afraid to push Emily into it. And so I'll let Emily pick up the story there.
And you were also afraid that it wouldn't be a safe place to bring 3 little girls.
Yeah, there was all these kinds of fears. And that's why I was reaching out to people, asking them questions about the reality on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, where to start? I guess I just felt like we need to make a decision. I got to the point late September where I just felt, I was like, okay, God, just show us, please. Like, we need to know what to do here. And I asked for a sign, you know, like, give me a sign. The very next day after I said that, I was just doing, you know, some little errands in town, and a woman at the store was talking to me about, you know, what was going on with my job and losing it and how I was feeling about that. And she was secretly unvaccinated as well. And, you know, we were basically whispering in the store. And then she said, you know, I have some friends that went to Mexico. They sold everything and went to Mexico, and they're super happy there. And I just felt like, wow, like this is what Tom's been talking about. And if these people can do it, we can do it. And yeah, I just started getting excited.
But there was something else that happened too. I can't remember what exactly it was. Oh, you had a conversation about getting fired with your manager or something like that, remember? And then you came downstairs.
Well, that same morning, a few minutes later, actually, I went back to the car, and I don't usually open Facebook in town, but I had a few minutes before my appointment, and a memory came up, you know, how it said 9 years ago today, and I had posted, we're leaving for Central America in 6 days, and Tom and I were going to go do our 7-week backpacking trip. And that came up from exactly 9 years ago. And I thought, okay, there's another song right there. Because
Facebook's good for something.
Yeah.
Wow. But there was something that happened. I can't remember exactly what conversation it was, but I think it was the final conversation when Emily spoke to her manager. And he said, you are being terminated for your non-compliance.
Well, actually,
wow,
he
that's
told me,
quite strong terminology.
He
Was
said,
it worded like that?
Well, not exactly, because they said I wasn't being terminated at that point.
Sorry, at that point. Later,
it was, well, you're not actually losing your job. You just can't come into work. And I said, well, I can't pay my bills. So to me, it's the same thing.
So they wouldn't pay you?
Right.
That's kind of losing your job, isn't it?
Yeah, so she was put on unpaid leave
and
for
then they
a couple
said,
months.
you won't be losing your job. But then a month later, I got an email that said, you have now been officially terminated.
Terminated?
Yes.
That's quite you have been officially terminated.
But so I want to finish that story. So Emily had this conversation about, you know, you can no longer come into work. And I remember that same day, I'd been working downstairs. Like I was working from remotely in the accounting work I was doing. And Emily came downstairs and said, we need to talk. And I said, okay. And so I looked at her and I could tell she was serious. Like this was like big. And she was like, we need to go. We need to get out of here. We need to list our house. We need to book tickets. Let's go. And I was just like, caught off guard, right? And I was like, I felt like I had been a deer in the headlights, paralyzed by fear until that moment when she came. And like, I say she like figuratively grabbed me by the shirt collar and said, let's do this. and from that moment on, it was like, wow, yeah, we do. We need to do this. And then things started to happen. Like that was the first week of October. Or was that the day that they implemented the travel restrictions too? Yeah, it was very close.
It was early October. I heard from my friend who had been listening to the news, and she said, it's official. They're not going to let us fly out of Canada in just 2 months, you know, and in the next month, we can fly without having a PCR test. But we decided we don't want to get PCR tests in order to fly. So let's fly before that date.
Well, and there's also some gray area. We weren't even sure if we would be able to in that month of November. So we said, let's make certain we get out before the end of October, before those new rules go into effect.
Yeah.
And so within 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks, when we heard the travel restrictions were going into effect, we sold our home.
What, and it went through that quickly?
We sold it in 4 days. 4 days of listing it. It was a desirable home. It was
in a good neighborhood.
It was a good neighborhood. It was the kind of home that, like, you know, most families could afford. Like, so it wasn't too expensive. So it was one of those ones that would go quickly. And so it was a hot market too. So it worked out well in that way. But we also sold both of our vehicles. We sold a lot. Emily was selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace every day. We had people coming 3 to 5 times a day.
The doorbell would ring like every hour for people to come and buy things that I was listing.
And
I realized, I just want to interject.
Sure.
I realized when they told me you're going to lose your job over this, I pondered this for weeks, right? And I realized they would rather let us be homeless and begging on the street than not do what we are told. And to me, that was so wrong and so evil that I was like, if they can do that, they wouldn't have any issues taking our kids away. If they decided we were unfit to parent them based on whatever they decided, And
at the same time, we had seen several news stories in Canada so there have been families where the parents have been divorced, where the one parent lost their rights to visit with their child because they were unvaccinated. Things like that. And so we saw like how close we were to that point of, potentially you're not fit to parent if you don't get vaccinated or you don't get your kids vaccinated. And there was also, this is a bit of a rabbit trail. I'll try not to go too deep into it, but there had been a couple of years earlier a story of a father in Canada who was jailed for 6 months and 6 months in jail for misgendering his child. And so in British Columbia, our province, we had sort of the most extreme woke court system that in the world. Misgendering. So
that
his
sounds
daughter,
like a very unbelievable story.
It's true. So and there's a media ban, so I'm probably not even supposed to talk about this, but I don't care. So there's a father.
Media bans can't affect normal members of the public.
Okay, but anyway, so no one's allowed to mention the names of this man and the doctors and the daughter, all the people involved in this story, and so there's a 13-year-old girl in British Columbia who wanted to change their gender, and parents were divorced as far as I know, and so the father didn't support it and the mother did, and the government got involved and started that transition process when the girl was 13, and so the father sort of protested or spoke out about it and but refused to refer to his daughter as his son, and then so anyways he was sentenced to 6 months in prison for speaking out on this publicly.
But hold a minute, let me get this straight. How do you jail someone for misgendering?
Apparently it's considered violence.
It's considered the same as hitting your child with a baseball bat. It's considered violence against your child.
Really? Is that specifically in Canada, or is that like... That seems, very...
so Canada put in protections against like transgender rights in the Human Rights Code. So
I remember that.
So
that was because Jordan Peterson was one of the people that sort of flagged that up back in the day, a long time ago, before he was famous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess it's like the way I see it, it's kind of scary that who determines what's hate or violence, or because if words are now violence. If misgendering someone is violence or hate speech, what anything can be hate speech.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, agreed. But 6 months in jail, that seems a little heavy-handed.
And so part of that was the fact that he spoke publicly. He was not supposed to speak publicly, and that's part of this whole media ban thing. He was supposed to be nameless, faceless, and he made a video speaking out about what's happening and how the court system is being completely unjust, and I think that was part of why he was sentenced.
So
did he do? Sorry, I've got to labour this point because this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Did he go to jail?
Yes, he got out early pending an appeal or something like that. But he spent several months in prison,
and then he got out early also on the grounds that he couldn't speak out about this.
Yes,
too, right?
Yeah. So he agreed to not speak out anymore. But he still has a pending court case.
Tom and I watched this go down even before COVID hit, and we thought to ourselves, we said, we don't want to raise kids in this kind of a society. Like maybe we should think about leaving Canada.
Yes,
really, back then.
Yeah, so
even back then.
I bet you never dreamed it would come to this.
No, not so soon. I think we thought maybe 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road, like Canada was going downhill and we might need to leave. But
we had our kids in a private school, but even still, things would, we'd hear about things going on at that school that we weren't really that okay with.
I don't want to.
When it's part of society, pretty hard to get away from. Unless you actually leave.
Like we could spend an hour talking about, wokeness in Canada and the stuff they're trying to teach kids. Podcast. Yeah. But just to get across the point that there was stuff going on in Canada that already planted the seed in our minds of we might need to leave this place because we don't feel like it's a place we want to raise our children. And I'd always thought if we could raise our kids the way we want and have other people with differing views respect our decisions, then that's fine. I'm fine if, my neighbor believes something completely different than me, as long as we're not forced to adopt their beliefs and teach our kids what they want us to teach them. But we could see it was trending in a different direction in Canada, and that fits right in with what happened with COVID and the vaccine and, forcing you to get something against your will.
Let me ask you a question then about that, because I've always thought of Canada, like I've been to Canada a number of times, and I always thought everyone was so friendly. Like I'll never forget the first time I ever went to Canada, we went to Toronto, and I went with an old girlfriend of mine, and we got on the tube, on the subway, and the two of us with backpacks on our backs, and I remember literally opening this map, and almost immediately two heads popped up and went, "Well, hello. Can I help you out there, sir?" Or something like that, Yeah. And it was like, that was my whole experience of Canada. It's just super nice people everywhere, happy to help, So, like, is there something in that? Is that why that Canada, because from an outside looking in, it does appear that there's some pretty crazy stuff going on there to me. And so why are nice people doing nasty things?
I think a lot of times, because Canadians are so easygoing and friendly and tolerant, they put up with too much. They let people walk all over them.
They're also very
when it comes to the government, right? We trust the government. We trust pharmaceutical companies, doctors.
Even the young generation coming through now, do they? I suppose I don't know whether you know that or not.
Personally, I think it's like countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, which were some of the worst throughout the pandemic. I think that those are the countries that have had it so good for 100 years or since World War II, essentially, that we have like multiple generations that have grown up without real problems, without real big issues, and have had it so good. And they've been able to trust their government. Mm-hmm. They've been able to say they're looking out for what's best for us. And, they wouldn't lie to us. And so I think that because it's been so good, like people in other parts of the world, developing parts of the world, places with more corrupt governments are less trusting of their governments. But because we haven't had government corruption to the same degree, although I would say Canada does have a lot of corruption under the surface that people don't know about. Yeah. But we have, had the illusion of being able to trust our government. And I think
we never questioned growing up, Tom and I have talked about this in the last few years. We never questioned whether our government was out to harm us or not up until just a few years ago.
So presumably then every single person has a line in the sand. Yours happened to be being forced or being coerced to do something you didn't want to do.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think everyone has that line in the sand? Do you think that, like, how far does it go before everyone starts?
That's a great question. I worry that most people don't. I really do. Because I've wanted to ask that question of friends or family who, basically told us, you're getting everything you deserve. You deserve to have all this happen to you. You deserve to lose your job. You deserve to have your rights taken away. I've always wanted to ask that. So at what point would you say they've gone too far? Is it when they ban us from grocery stores and buying food? Because they talked about that in Canada. Is it when they take your kids away because you don't get the vaccine?
I mean, but it's more like, what are they taking them away for? In your case, it was just, and this is the strange thing about what's going on here is, I think a lot of people didn't care either way about the vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
Until someone said, right, now you're not doing what you're told. And then I think a lot of people just dug their heels in the sand and went, well, screw you then. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And so what's the line in the sand, the next line in the sand, do you think? Like, it's not a vaccination, it's what? Like, I could think of things like the truckers' demonstration that we all saw, and bank accounts being frozen, and every time a government oversteps the mark, more people become its enemy. And I think you could argue on a trajectory, in the end, everyone comes up against, if a government really is an authoritarian force, in the end, everyone comes up against it because there's nothing left. They don't
have enough money left to hand out to enough people to remain supporters. They're left with just the military and the people with the guns
and the bureaucracy.
Yeah, and the bureaucracy.
I mean, everyone ends up working for them.
Yeah,
literally, and either paid or unpaid. Because one way that those kind of systems work very well is your neighbours grass you up.
Yeah,
don't you? Your neighbours tell on you. They're kind of unpaid sort of like members.
Snitches.
Yeah, and that happened. I mean, we even experienced that back at home. We live in a very remote community, and the houses are all spread up miles apart. And I know for a fact that during the first lockdown, somebody, and I won't mention anything too hard, but somebody mentioned some lights were on in some woods near where we live. And a phone call was put in, I mean, I'm talking about, if you saw where we live in the middle of nowhere. No one gives a crap what we do up there. But some curtain twitching happened. Some people looked through and it really did bring out the worst in people.
Mm-hmm.
Really. That was the most disappointing. There were two things that really disappointed me about what happened. Was number one, how many people just rolled over and went, all right, let's just stay indoors and not do anything. Let's close our business down. And then also the number of people that didn't respect the decisions of other people in all its forms, because there were so many decisions to make during this thing.
I think a big part of that was this idea that if you don't get the vaccine, you're being selfish because you're spreading COVID to great grandma and all these people with weakened immune systems, or you could be killing people if you don't get the vaccine. And so I think that propaganda that they used, even though it wasn't scientifically based, it's been proven now, really made a lot of, even millions of Canadians say, well, I want to do the right thing.
They made you feel like a hero for being obedient. And like you said, ratting out your neighbor, wearing a mask, getting a vaccine. Those are all they had commercials calling you a superhero, calling kids superheroes. And they had people posting their selfies of just getting their vaccine. I couldn't believe the number of my friends and contacts on social media who were posting their selfies. And I thought, my goodness, what is wrong with these people? They bought into this propaganda wholeheartedly that, and I've seen the same thing happen with so many things, the Black Lives Matter thing, the Ukraine flags in the bios. It just seems there's one after another. That there's a certain narrative. You got to put your thing on social media to show that you're part of the right team. And, this didn't really exist in the same way before social media, but it's...
And that, I think we could loosely call the signaling of virtue, of your virtues. Is that right? Whatever that is, I mean, I think we all do it in our own way. Mm-hmm. But certainly something about the way that the internet has connected us all has meant that is a very simple procedure to do.
Yeah.
And
doesn't cost anything.
No, it literally doesn't cost anything. Literally. This is the beauty of it. There's no proof of work in signaling virtue these days at all. You just have to put a flag in your bio.
Yeah. And now I'm a better person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really high value action if you're a human being. Yeah. If you can convince yourself that it works, it's a great strategy to feel good about yourself, isn't it?
It worked both ways too, because some of us gained enemies. Our friends turned into, maybe enemy is a strong word, but, certain people didn't want to say hi to me anymore at my kids' school because they saw the things I was posting on Facebook.
Which is so weird. What the other really disappointing thing about this whole situation is how conversation and discussion and how all these things which are absolutely imperative in society to come to any kind of conclusion has broken down in such an immense way. Mm-hmm. And imagine that. I mean, I can appreciate not speaking to someone because they're being nasty to you or something. You just edit those people out of your life. But a differing opinion in my life, if someone has a different opinion to me, I'm drawn towards them. I'm like, I need to speak to this person. I need to test my own theories.
Right.
Like, I need to know, because I'm obviously brainwashed too in my own way, aren't I? But unless I can talk to that person who has the complete different opinion to me, I'm never going to be able to test my own theories. I'm just going to sit here and sort of just espouse the same thing, and which is probably what we're doing right now. But hey, but yeah, it's like, it's super disappointing, and I mean, it's so many things that happen now split the society 50-50. Even I noticed yesterday, Elon Musk put on Twitter, "Shall we reinstate Trump?" And there was like 15 million votes or something. Who knows? A lot of people, and it went 48-52. And it's like everything's 50-50 now, and I think that actually comes down to personality traits. I think 50% of the people are kind of more liberal minded, and 50% of the people are more conservative minded. And I think that's very normal. I think that's how society functions. I think, liberal people are good are very creative often. They're often like change. They like all these things. Conservative people tend to sort of gatekeep things and don't want change. And they both have these really important roles in life. Like if you're starting a company, for example, you want creative people to start it, and then you want conservative people to maintain it. Yeah, right. We all should, whatever your political ideas are, I don't care at all. I just want to know what your strengths are, and then But we've got to this point now where everything's 50-50, which is natural, I think. But they're not. But no one is seeing. Hardly anyone, let's say, is seeing the good in what they perceive as the opposition to them.
Well, there's also an attempt to shut down, freedom of speech, and shut down debate and the one side of the argument. And, like you see how many people have been banned from Twitter. I guess things are improving nowadays, but doctors, anyone who spoke out, like people who literally pointed out factual evidence were banned from social media. A year later, it's like, oh, actually they were right, but they went against the narrative. So we had to ban them from society. So how can you have open and honest debate? How can you find the truth when, if you say something that someone doesn't like, you're prevented from saying it? Well,
interestingly enough, Tom, obviously, I could talk to you about free cities. That's my I do my free cities pitch now.
Well, I'm very excited about that. Actually, you should do a pitch on it.
Well, but I mean, no, but we're onto something here, because I think what you realize, if you go into this deep enough, is that we are obsessed with this notion of democracy as being this highest ideal that we should maintain. But actually, the idea of democracy in its current form is very disempowering for most people. Like when you have a, inverted commas, democratic vote, almost always it's like 70% of the people that voted are disenfranchised, because, say you vote for your political party and the opposition gets in, you're already disenfranchised. Yeah. Plus, even if your party gets in, you have absolutely no way of knowing whether they're going to do what they said they do, because they never do. Yeah. But in this system, you don't get the choice to opt out. And this is the problem with democracy. There's no opting out of democracy, other than if you kind of do something like what you've done. I mean, you're still opting into the system in El Salvador, but you're much less accountable by the state here, I would say, than you were back home. Is that fair to say?
Well, I mean, we've only been living in El Salvador for 2 months. We came.
Well, you've had a lot of time here before.
Yeah, well, we came 2 months before, and so now we've been here another 2 months. So we have 4 months total in El Salvador. So I would say yes, there's much less government involvement in your life here, which I love, and part of that is just because it's less developed. The government has less money to start to meddle in people's affairs. I think. There's this thing when society becomes more affluent, there's more money. It's easier for the government to get tax revenue. It's easier for them to start, because they start out doing things that are needed, right? And that's what I see happening here. I see the government doing things that in Canada we were doing 50 years ago, 30 years ago, trying to clean up the garbage off the streets and the beaches, trying to reduce crime, trying to, like these kinds of things that I think government can do and really contribute to the betterment of society. But then we've gotten to the point in the West, I think, that there's no more real problems to solve, and so we invent problems. We're creating problems, and part of it is, I think, because certain sides of the political debate view it as to their advantage. So maybe they want to create racial division or division in other ways in society so that they can benefit from it politically. And
which is a power struggle, basically.
It is. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen in the developing world, but I think there's more like real problems to solve here. And that's what I see in El Salvador is the government is focused on, reducing crime, cleaning up the garbage, basic things like that, and getting people water and better roads and like the functions that I think government can perform well. I mean,
well, and also being in El Salvador now is very much a bet on Bukele,
yes,
the president,
100%,
yeah,
which is, that's a whole other topic in itself. Because personally, I look at what Bukele's doing and I see huge change for the better. Mm-hmm. But there's no way in hell I would trust a politician in his position either. Mm. So I'm very tentatively watching what's going on and saying this is great. And, this yourself by living here, the number of El Salvadorians coming home from abroad now is unprecedented. If you ever want any evidence that what Bukele is doing is good, you just have to look at that. It doesn't matter whether you think he's too hard-handed or he's do this, do that. The actual result is local people are super happy and people are coming home from America like you would never believe. Like the everywhere I go, I'm just meeting El Salvadorians with amazing British English accents. I go, where have you come from? It's like, we've come back from America. We want to start a business here. I want to,
Yeah, same here. We're meeting them all over the place. Even in our neighborhood, there's many who've moved back from the States. We have a friend who's a half Salvadorian, half Canadian, or two friends that are one's full Salvadorian, one's half, and they both come back. And they have the option. They have Canadian citizenship, residency. They can live in Canada, and they're choosing to come here because they see the direction the country's moving in. And so that tells you a lot when someone has a choice to live in the developed world, and maybe they weren't even that concerned about the vaccination stuff. Like us, we came here partly because we didn't feel like we had much of a choice. There's people deciding to come here that weren't even that concerned about that issue. They like the move, what thing that's happening with Bitcoin, right? The move to a sounder money, we're not going to inflate your purchasing power away. There's not the push for the sort of like what we refer to as the woke agenda onto children here. There's more traditional values.
There doesn't appear to be any agenda in that sense at all.
No. Because they're focused on those things, like I said.
They're teaching children to read.
Yes,
they're not teaching them anything about ideology at all, I don't think.
People are more concerned about how can I put dinner on the table tonight than what gender might I be.
Or the government's concerned about how do we get computers for kids in school.
So Emily, do you think that that's how all society should work? Why are we so concerned about whether our kids... Well, I'm not at all concerned. I said to Alice the other day, do you know what transgenderism? And she said, yeah. And I said, do you care? And she went, no. And that's where the conversation ended, because it's kind of true. It's really none of my business whether you're transgender or not. I don't care. I don't actually interact with people on that level at all. I interact, like us. I want to talk to you. And are you a nice person? And are we having a productive conversation? And if that's true, that's mainly all I really care about. Mm-hmm. And I hope my kids grow up like that as well.
Yeah. But then you draw the line, at least we do, where, people are saying, well, we need to indoctrinate these children with this ideology.
Yeah, they wouldn't use that word, but that's essentially
with these ideas.
We're the same. Emily and I, we both are like of the opinion that if you're an adult, do whatever you want with your own life, right? Sleep with whoever you want to sleep with, change your gender if you wish. If that's what you feel you need to do, you have the right to do that. But it's just, you don't have the right to force our kids to learn and believe this ideology that you espouse. And that's where we drew the line. We felt like it was becoming almost a forced thing in Canadian society that you must adopt these beliefs. There's a real push. And so I'm very much libertarian minded, and I think every adult should have the right to do whatever drugs they want. Like you're free. If you want to, I might not agree with your decision. I might tell you as a friend, I don't think you're doing the right thing, or it's harming you, or I think you're on the wrong track. Yeah. But I think you should have the right to do that. don't think anybody should be able to take that away from you. It's just when you start telling me or my kids what they have to do. Same thing with the vaccination.
Yeah, it is. It's telling you what to do, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that some people just don't care about that. Like some people don't mind being told what to do at all. I just wonder where that line in the sand is, and is it there for everyone? Because we're on. I mean, if you follow these kind of things, if you follow this trajectory forward, and you have to know a little bit about technology and central bank digital currencies and social credit scores and all this kind of stuff, but it doesn't take a lot to do a bit of research and see the trajectory we're on, and the future for many of us could be very dystopian and completely anti-freedom. And I even think that when, I'm kind of looking at, if I was a government, I'd want to implement this as well, because we live in this age where, people having freedom is becoming quite dangerous. I mean, like in another 50 years, imagine the kind of weaponry you could get hold of just on the black market, as a
like
kind of
drones. And
I don't know, drones with I think
laser beams
or whatever. I don't know. But the point is, you could cause a lot of damage. Even now you could, if you really wanted to. And there are crazy people out there. There's a very small minority of people that would have, having psychological problems and want to destroy the world. And it's not far away from a time when they might actually be able to do things like that. Yeah. And I think governments look at that and go, we need to, or not even governments maybe, but powerful people look at that and go, if we want to maintain the kind of life we've got, we need to somehow curb this.
Right.
And the best way to curb it, I think, on such a large scale, is a combination of using technology, like a social credit score, which, we could go into, but plus just getting normal people to police the system, which is kind of what happens in historically. This has happened quite a lot. If you look at Russia and the rise of communism, there were people that, like I say, worked for the state, who were just general people in the community, and you either you align yourself with one or the other. And I think that really you can split people into two types. There's people that want to tell other people what to do, and people that don't. And it's quite a common, it's how I would judge most of the people I met, because I think it's super important. And I think you often were you both that way inclined? Do you think originally you are both don't really care what other people do as long as they keep it to themselves?
Yeah, I feel like that's sort of always been my philosophy. Let us each have our own freedoms. We can do things the way we each feel is best, but don't force things on other people.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about the process, and I don't mean the physical process of doing this. Has it paid a toll on you? I'm sure it has, because there's I've just spent 10 months traveling with my family, and we weren't even running away from a vaccine problem or whatever. We were just looking. I was actually doing my own version of risk analysis. I was in the UK looking at the situation from a quite macro lens and thinking, I don't like what's going on. I think we should get out there and just check our options. So we went to countries where, we went to Mexico, we went to El Salvador, we went to America, we went to some places in Europe, just checking out the vibe, looking for. So I wanted to get information for myself, so I felt I could steer us as a family in the best direction possible. So, and I know how much of a toll that put on in my relationship with my missus, and I think the kids. I didn't feel like. I think they had a great time. They did have a great time. They're very adaptive kids, but I think the main stress was between me and Liz in those times. How have you dealt with that then?
How have we dealt with what specifically?
The stress of
stress of moving and everything.
Men and women are super different, right? And it's now unavoidable to sort of to not say that. And with regards to risk as well, like we were talking about this last night, I can sit here and not know what I'm doing tomorrow morning and not care. I can still be as excited about today as anything. You know, something terrible could happen to me tomorrow, but I don't care until that thing happens. Whereas Liz, that makes her super nervous, not knowing what's happening, like where, you know, like, and it causes, you know, it's huge issues, you know, between us, because we have to find a middle ground. And when you're trying to find a middle ground, you always feel like one or other of you is not getting what they want. I want to be more crazy and just explore and experiment, and if she wants to be more conservative about it, then I feel like I'm going down, or she feel like she's, you know, she's coming down to my level, or I'm going down to her level. You know, no two people are the same, and especially the dynamic between men and women, it's even more different.
Yeah, very much so.
So what, you know,
good reminder. But yeah, I think we, for the most part, we spent our winter last year, you know, this past winter, traveling around and being adventuresome, you know. So that was really fun, and it was great for the kids, for all of us. But it feels like we're in a different season now, you know, like that we're settling down in El Salvador, and that we're not doing that many adventures now. And for me, that's really hard, that I have to reach out and try to find some friends, even though it feels like a bit of a difficult task. There are some women I know that work full-time online, or, you know, are just live far away from where we are right now. And I feel like it's going to take some time, and I have to keep reminding myself this, you know, moving to a new community, because we did that in Canada once too. Moving somewhere new, it's going to take time to build friendships, to meet people. And
is it tempting when you think about home and say I mean, I think Canada, they don't have as many restrictions now, is that right? On the whole, they're pulling back a little bit. When you see that, does that tempt you into going, oh, well, look, maybe we should go back?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it was really hard, because we went home for 7 weeks this summer. And in some ways for me, it was very hard to leave again, you know, coming back to all my established friendships and all my close family members, and then leaving those relationships. That was very hard.
It might be worth mentioning now, you were fined, was it $12,000 for going home?
Yes. So I very much wanted to mention this. So that helped make it easier to leave Canada the way we were treated upon our return. So Canada, when we went back, and it was July 30th, I believe. You
were going back for a wedding, right?
For my sister's wedding, yeah. And so I wasn't going to let their ridiculous rules prevent me from being at my only sibling's wedding. So we decided, we really struggled about that. We did not want to go back to Canada. We did not want to go back when there's those restrictions in place and face all that. And
but we also didn't want to comply with things that we felt were wrong.
Yeah, we didn't want to comply with. Yeah, we felt like we were just supporting that agenda if we complied with it. And so we really debated about what to do. I watched all kinds of videos about how people were dealing with it, not using ArriveCan.
People were flying in private jets and stuff, weren't they? And,
yeah, there's a whole movement of that. I'm not going to give it away because I think they're kind of trying to stay low key. But I know, yeah, there's groups that set up chartered flights and things like that. So there's people creating options. They're quite expensive. So, you know, compared to a regular flight, like we're talking sometimes 10 times the cost.
And we were thinking we won't make it to this wedding, because at that point, a couple months before the wedding, they still hadn't lifted the restrictions for the unvaccinated
we couldn't
leave Canada.
We couldn't leave Canada at the time.
So you could have got in, but you couldn't have got back out again.
Yeah, exactly.
So but that was back in May or June when we were looking at going, and they hadn't yet lifted that. And we said, we are not going back to Canada if we're not allowed to leave. Mm-hmm. You know, I'll miss my sister's wedding.
I'm not surprised. That would have been horrendous.
Yeah.
But you had no house, nothing.
Yeah.
Stuck in stuff.
Tom likes to call it prison planet. Well, I see why.
Yeah. So I call my social media names are like escape from prison planet. So
You're really taking it seriously,
Yeah.
Tom, aren't you?
Yeah, I do. But when they lifted that restriction and they said, okay, you're allowed to enter the country, you have to test 4 times within 8 days. You have to quarantine for 2 weeks.
This is during, I have to mention, this is during a time when, for example, in England, there were no restrictions anymore. They ended.
The majority of the developed world had dropped everything.
I don't know if there was another country that had the same.
I think there was like one. I think
Probably
maybe
America. I think America, because you still have to be vaccinated to enter America.
But not if you're an American citizen. They have
Right,
no
I'm
restrictions
sure.
against their own
Yeah,
citizens.
yeah,
And
right.
we are Canadian citizens. So Canada was might have been Holland or one other country that had it. This one I was looking at these kinds of restrictions. And so we decided we are not going to comply with this because, so basically Canada had this app called ArriveCan, which they still have, but it's optional, I believe now. And so what it is it's a government spying app. And so they get you to upload your vaccination status, your flight details, your phone number, your address where you'll be staying when you're returning to the country so that they can spy on you. They call you multiple times a day to check in on you. They
Send someone to your home.
get your
Really?
PCR test result,
Really
your test
creepy,
results,
isn't
I guess. They actually send someone to your home to check in on you. I just
at
came out
random
that
times.
Really?
Canada spent nearly $50 million enforcing like quarantine checks and sending people to your homes and calling. But so we didn't. So part of it was that we didn't want to support this thing, but we also just didn't want to lock ourselves in a house for 14 days when we got back to Canada because we knew it was ridiculous.
Mm.
We took a COVID test in Mexico, came back negative. We went through the legit process because we thought we wouldn't be able to board a flight without it. And so we did that. But when we showed up at the airport at the WestJet check-in counter, they said, you have to do ArriveCan. And I said, no, we're not doing it. And they said, well, you can't get on the flight without it. And I said, look, here's the page. I held up my phone and I said, here is the ArriveCan website where it says Canadian citizens will not be denied boarding even if they don't complete ArriveCan.
Nice.
And he said, well, you're going to get fined when you get back to Canada. And I said, that's fine. I'll take responsibility for that. But we're not doing ArriveCan. And so he said, okay, fine. So we got on the flight. And so then the whole flight I'm stressing about what's going to happen when we get to Canada. Like, what's it going to be like? Because
how long was that flight?
6 hours? 5 hours. 5 hours.
That must have been nerve-wracking.
Yeah, actually, I kind of forgot about it. I started watching movies and, just forgot. But then as we were landing, I was like, oh, boy, I forgot we're heading back into the storm here. And so I'd seen different videos of people and their experiences. So many people were getting fined tens of thousands of dollars. Some people just got through like nothing. They didn't care. And so we really had no idea what was going to happen. But they made a big deal about it. Like, big exclamation marks show up when you scan your whatever we had to do. We'd scan our passports. And when your ArriveCan's not in the system, it prints you out this piece of paper with big exclamation marks instead of check marks. And so right away you're flagged as like something's wrong here. And so right away they said, well, how come you didn't do ArriveCan? And I said, because we think it's wrong. We think it's wrong to discriminate, based on vaccination status. And they said, you're going over there to talk to the guy in the booth. And so they sent us over to this.
Bearing in mind, you've got your 3 kids with you.
We got our 3 kids, yeah. So we
And
have
it's
3.
midnight.
Was
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
That must have been lovely. A lovely experience.
Yeah.
Welcome home, guys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we had our 3 girls. They're 9, 7, and 4 now. And so they sent us to a very angry Canadian Border Services officer who, sternly lectured us about, what we're doing is bad and how we need to comply. And we said we won't. And then he walked us over, he grabbed our passports, which he already had, and took them over to another desk where there's a woman, and we didn't know. I'd been recommended, don't talk to public health. Don't give your passports to public health. Well, we didn't have a choice. He took our passports and walked us over to public health. We didn't know who it was, but there was another booth.
She had an RCMP officer
Yeah,
standing nearby.
What's RCMP?
Canadian
police.
Police, Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So there was an RCMP officer, the Border Services Guard, and the public health official who were all there. And they had our passport. Like, we couldn't grab it and leave.
Run.
There's no. So people say, "Oh, don't let them take your passport." Well, there's no choice. Like, we didn't have a choice in this. I was told to ask, "Am I being detained?" Well, I asked. I said, "Am I being detained? Am I free to leave?" And he said, "No, you're not being detained, but you're not free to leave." Okay. So we're just there.
Isn't that the same thing?
And they know that you don't know what's going on.
And the woman, she she said, well, I just need to write up your fines. And we wanted to know, well, how long is that going to take? Oh, it shouldn't take too long.
15 minutes or something, she said. And it ended up taking about an hour, I think, all in all. But at the time, I was quite outspoken. I was telling them how, this is entirely irrational and wrong. And every developed country in the world pretty much has dropped these restrictions. The United States doesn't do this to their own citizens. Almost no European nation does this. Australia, New Zealand. I told them all this, and I said, I'm never going to teach my kids that it's okay to follow irrational rules, and that. So and I can't remember everything else I said, but they're pretty much like robots. The people there working there, they show no emotion.
What are the kids saying and doing while all this is going on?
Eva said to Tom, Daddy, are you going to have to go to jail?
Yeah, she was quite scared. Our other two were not paying attention. They were just like horseplay, hanging off the bars and the chairs and just being little kids. But my oldest, Eva, was paying attention, and she was really listening to what's going on, and she could tell it was serious. And she said, Daddy, are you going to go to jail? And I had a good chance while we were waiting, as we sat there, even after I talked to them. So we probably sat there in the chair for like 45 minutes, and I had a really good chance to talk to her and explain to her why we're doing this. But she could see all the people just walking through, showing their Vax Pass and Arrive Can, smiles. Walking through. And, 99% of people were just happy to show their Vax Pass, right? Proudly displaying it. And I remember thinking that, if only a few more people would just say, I'm not going to comply with this, that we could put an end to this. And I know
that must be hard, mate. That must be hard. You feel like you're putting your own kids at a loss. I mean, really, seriously, it must have crossed your mind. What am I putting my kids through?
Yeah,
it must have, because they are literally there's people just not waiting for an hour at the thing and getting harassed, and
but in the big scheme of things, it was an hour of our lives, right? I put my kids, my oldest daughter, through a little bit of trauma's too strong of a word, stress, seeing that. But at the same time, I feel like it was a really powerful lesson, and I remember telling her that, Eva, she said, Daddy, why are all those people just walking through? And I said, because they're showing their vaccine passport. They did Arrive Can. They're following the rules. And I said, Eva, but these, when Mommy and Daddy we think these rules are wrong. We think that what's happening in Canada is completely wrong, that they're treating people different based on whether they have the vaccine or not. And they're punishing people who don't have it. And, because locking you in your house for 14 days and forcing you to take 4 COVID tests in 8 days is a punishment. We know it's not backed by science. We know there's no logic to it. It's just a punishment for disobedience is what I like to call it.
And at the same time, if you were fully vaccinated, had your 2 jabs and tested positive for COVID, you could come back to Canada and just quarantine for 5 days.
Really?
Yeah, so if you had COVID, you were treated better than if you were unvaxxed and didn't have it. So we knew this was irrational, but I just got to finish this story quickly. So I told Eva, this is wrong, what's happening, and this is why we're making a stand. This is why we're doing this. And we're okay taking a punishment and getting fines because we believe we need to stand up for what's right. And she looked at me and she was almost like teary-eyed, and she said, we're doing a good thing, Daddy. We're doing a good thing. And, that made me realize it was worth it. It was a good thing that we had our kids see that, and we didn't, shield them from that. So I'm actually thankful we did it, even though we ended up getting $11,500 in fines. And now we have a court date for December 12th, I believe, to deal with that.
Which you can go on Zoom, is that right?
Apparently, I can file a form. I still have yet to do that.
So, obviously, you're just going to not pay that fine. Is that how it works?
Well, I'm never going to pay the fine. And, I'm working on lots of things behind the scenes to make sure that doesn't happen. But we'll see what comes of it.
Do you think at any point in the future they could, say, detain you for not paying the fine if you arrive at the border?
I actually know a guy I follow on Twitter who was arrested when he returned over an unpaid fine of $150, some minuscule amount. They handcuffed him at the airport. It's just absurd. And he had not complied with the COVID restrictions as well. So maybe they did it to make a point. Maybe they kind of wanted to make an example of him for that reason. But yeah, he was handcuffed. They did let him go after being detained for a while.
But a lot of people have had their fines thrown out. So
Yes.
we're praying that we'll be some of those people. But I mean, at the same time, you have to be prepared.
Yeah.
It might not be.
Yeah, so we hope that it gets thrown out. I've even thought about maybe contacting some of these legal organizations that are providing help. There's Fight the Fines. We've been donating money to support other people's fights against this kind of stuff. So maybe they would help us out. So I think I'll reach out to them and see if they'll maybe send a letter or whatever on our behalf, just from a lawyer to make it look more legit. But I'm prepared to go to this virtual court hearing and argue my case. I mean, I'm going to call it what it is. It's a kangaroo court, and it's irrational. And you find me if you like, but this is wrong. What's happening in Canada? I moved my family to El Salvador because of what's happening in Canada. And I hope, like I would say, right to the judge or whoever's there, that do you realize you're contributing to this? Do you
think they care?
No.
Do you think your average judge cares?
Well, maybe not. I mean, the people at the airport didn't seem to care. They seem to be pretty robot-like. Didn't have any sympathy for... But I think there are people who do. You don't know who they are. But regardless, I mean, I think at least for me, it's just... I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror, right? And say that I spoke the truth, regardless of... Because we can't... I often say this, that we can't have our preconceived ideas of how other people will respond. Because a lot of people like to say, oh, it's not worth that because you're not going to change their mind. Well, that's not up to us to decide. Like I say, like, that's in God's hands. That's, all we can do is our part. All we can do is, do the right thing as we see it. And then whatever other people do with that, that's on them. But I'm not gonna say, oh, I shouldn't even try. I shouldn't even do anything, because, I mean, then what's the point of anything we're doing, right?
Well, you would posit that on your deathbed you would think about these kind of things. You wouldn't remember the time you complied with irrational rules. You'd remember the time you stood up to those irrational rules. And like you say, then what is life actually? What is life about?
Yeah.
Life is about your children. Your life is about you until you have kids, and then it's about your children. And it's about giving them the best start that they can. And if you feel that is in a place like this, then that's it, really, Yeah,
and if El Salvador, say, like you were saying, Nayib Bukele might not be here forever or whatever, but if El Salvador gets bad, we'll find somewhere else. We'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we have our values that we want to live by, and what we want to raise our kids to live by, and we will go where we can. Like, as long as there's a place to live freely and raise our kids the way we want to, we will go there. It doesn't matter if it's in Africa or Europe or Asia or South America. Right now, we view this as a great place to be, and we're happy to be here, and we see the excitement happening here amongst expats and locals who are moving back, and there's an energy here that's palpable, and we loved Mexico. We really enjoyed our time there, but there's something special happening in El Salvador where that I didn't see in Mexico. Mexico, we connected with the freedom communities everywhere we went. We traveled all over Mexico. We jumped around a lot, probably to like 7 or 8 states. I can't even remember how many, but we connected with freedom communities. We go on Telegram and find the local freedom group of like-minded people. And we met some fantastic people in Mexico. We made many friends all over Mexico. And, Mexico is like ground zero for freedom communities.
Well, they were the only country in the world that didn't take restrictions.
Like nothing, like no PCR tests, anything. Yeah.
Well, and that's why... I mean, it was for you guys. I think it was the only place you could travel to, wasn't it, when you left?
It was the only place we could travel to without a PCR test.
Right.
So we could have come to some other Central American, South American countries, but we wanted to avoid the PCR test, and we were familiar with Mexico. We thought it was a good starting off point, and yeah.
Well, I mean, when we arrived, we came from Spain to Mexico in search of just being left alone once again, which we definitely found in Mexico, and. That was my first experience, my first encounter with what we now know as COVID refugees, which is a funny term when you think about it, but it's a real thing. And
we are them.
We arrived in Yucatan ironically, we actually stayed in Puerto Morelos. We stayed in a community
very
near
close
there.
to
Yeah. It's funny how things turn out. But in the place we were staying, all the families were COVID refugees, all of them, except us. We never considered ourselves COVID refugees. We were just like traveling around looking for fact-finding mission, trying to find places to live. But when you went down to the pool and sat there and talked to everyone, it was Germans, New Zealanders, and Canadians. And they all had the same story. They all had this story that they had to get out. And it's turned the whole refugee narrative on its head. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's true.
Isn't it? We've got some people coming.
Why do you have headphones and microphones?
We're doing an interview, love.
This is for Tim's podcast.
You can listen, okay? You can just listen. We're going to keep talking, okay? So I was just going to finish that thing I was saying about the differences between El Salvador and Mexico. So Mexico, although the freedom communities are fantastic and we really connected with people there, amongst the expats, there was this sort of like, I felt a mentality of like, let's find a place to hide out, right? For what's coming and what's happening in the world. And here there's this different mindset amongst the people that are coming of like, let's change the world.
Yeah.
Let's build something incredible. Let's be an example for other parts of the world.
I had exactly the same experience.
Yeah.
And that's why I was so drawn to this place. And there's things that are not as good. Like the infrastructure here is nowhere near what it is in Mexico. The availability of certain goods when you're going to grocery shopping is not as good. There's many things lacking here. It's more of a developing country than Mexico is. So there's drawbacks, but that energy and excitement and that what's happening here is, I think, so worthwhile to be a part of, that we're willing to give up some of those other things to be a part of this incredible movement that's happening in this country.
My interpretation of that, because I had the same experience. In Mexico, we connected with people, but we made no long-lasting, deep relationships. And then as soon as I got to El Salvador, it was like, oh my God, here are my people. But it was, I always put that down to them being Bitcoiners. And
yeah, it's true.
You know,
a lot of it.
Because the Bitcoin culture and the Bitcoin place, I don't know, space or whatever you want to call it, is very up my street, because it espouses most of my own particular ideals. It's very libertarian minded. It's very it's a culture of verifying things rather than just trusting someone's opinion. You know, it's all those things. And as a result, when you arrive here, as you know, like when I first met you guys, I think we were talking about this stuff within like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas you can, you know, in Mexico, you sometimes
feel people out. For
yeah,
a while
for
before.
sure.
Yeah, and here, like I agree. I would always say that, like, when you meet someone who's a Bitcoiner or like-minded, freedom-minded individual, you go miles deep or right off the bat, right? You don't spend this time small talking and making chit-chat about meaningless stuff. And there's lots of conversations you have where you with other people who, you know, you just don't feel that comfortable telling how you really feel. Whereas here we meet so many like-minded individuals.
Well, I feel here that there is a level of chit-chat that just doesn't happen here. Because, you know, if people understanding Bitcoin and the Bitcoin world takes time. That's all it does.
Yeah.
10,000 hours of study, and you can know as much as the next guy or girl. And so you can suss people out very, very quickly. If you talk about a certain thing and they're having that conversation with you, you also know that there's a bunch of other stuff that they've contemplated, because you have to.
True.
And you know, libertarian ideas, which loosely speaking, I don't think it's even libertarian. It's just letting people experiment, wanting other people to go through their own process and learn their own lessons and create things and make mistakes and succeed and all that stuff. It's just an inherent part of the culture. So why would you ever want someone to not experiment or to not try their own thing? You know, and that's happens here. So you can bring up anything in conversation and people want to hear what your opinion is.
Yeah, that's true. I do find Bitcoiners to be very open-minded people. And I mean, maybe not about like if you
shitcoin.
question Bitcoin, yeah, not about shitcoin. That's
Well, no,
but they are very open minded in terms of like I meet Bitcoiners who are, devout Christians or atheists or new agey or in between, and I meet Bitcoiners who are hardcore carnivore meat lovers. I meet vegan Bitcoiners. Like they're across the spectrum, really. Sometimes Bitcoin Twitter makes you think they're very they're only one way, but when you meet them in reality, they're across a huge spectrum of different type mindsets.
We've lost Emily now.
Oh, she's just in the washroom.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I agree. And I don't actually even think on the whole Bitcoiners are closed-minded about Bitcoin. I think we still, my whole life is a constant process of challenging my own ideas on it.
Yeah.
It's just that when a bunch of Bitcoiners get together, we just rage on shitcoins and like,
yeah, for sure.
But how have you found that, Emily? You've kind of probably been introduced to the idea of Bitcoin by being here. Did you even was it something you thought about back in Canada or not at all?
You wish I'd shut up about it?
Because of Tom, yeah. I mean, I can definitely appreciate the idea of getting away from government-controlled money, government's ability to just keep printing money, because you look at Canada right now and the price of everything, whether it's gas or food or housing, has just shot through the roof in the last few years. And I think a big part of that is just, all these handouts. Oh, you want to stay home because of the COVID lockdowns? We'll just give you money. And they're even handing it out to people that live on the street and never used to make a cent.
Well, and also it gives you the option to lock people down.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the main advantage of being able to hand out free money is you can tell people what to do.
And they're happy to stay home and play video games if they're getting free
sure.
money for beer and pot.
Yeah.
Shall we? That the kids are now lurking.
Yeah.
We can. I really want to carry on this conversation, but do you want to
take a break? Or?
No, not even take a break. Just find them something that they might do. So they're not.
Yeah. Do you guys want to start another movie? You can watch half a movie while we finish our conversation.
Little House on the Prairie.
Sure.
You lucky things. You watching Little House on the Prairie?
Yeah, as a family. But...
I love that program.
Yeah, we watched part of it all together, and now we're gonna finish it right now.
Go for it.
Tim, wanna finish?
You and I can
Little House
finish
on the
it.
Prairie?
Wow, Little House on the Prairie. You are old school, aren't you?
Well, it's funny. We're typically not but it's funny. I don't know. Oh, Emma found the book. Oh, and a friend recommended.
A friend of mine was letting her kids watch it, and
we
I remembered that. Oh yeah, that was a show we watched when we were kids. It's very wholesome.
Yeah,
not like a lot of the things our kids want to watch.
But we had been letting our kids watch a lot of dumbed down cartoon shows on Netflix previously. We canceled Netflix, but previously we had let them watch a lot of and I'd read some stuff from I was introduced to Daniel Prince, through Bitcoin, and then I started listening and reading his stuff on. He recommended John Taylor Gatto and he talked a lot about how we're sort of dumbing down kids, giving them these simplistic cartoon stories and encouraging sort of childlike thinking until they're older. And that resonated with me, and I thought I want my kids to, if they're gonna watch something on TV, I'd like to, ingrain good values and something that makes them think. And so when I heard about that, I remember watching Little House on the Prairie when I was a kid and loving that show.
Yeah.
And I used to watch it with my dad. My dad, he really loves the old school stories like that. And it's funny, we were watching the first half of the first episode the other night, and we were laughing about how Emma and I were looking at each other, quietly, thinking, communicating without words, how much we resonated with the story. It's a story of a husband and a wife with 3 little girls who leave their home because they don't feel like it's the right place anymore, and they move to an unknown land and are settling down. And that's our story.
Remind me, was it just them? They were settlers in America, weren't they?
Yeah, so they had been living
on the East Coast.
On the East in the United States, but the area they were in was becoming too crowded, and there was not enough hunting game and land and stuff to support enough those people. So they said, well, we need to go west where they're giving 160 acres to families who settle there. We can have our own land and support our family better and have a better life. And so they ventured out into the unknown wilderness, and
it's relevant. They're a family on the run, or they're not quite on the run, they're on the move.
But they would rather be adventurous and take risks and encounter danger than just stay put and be safe. And that resonates with us a lot.
Yeah.
And be so-called safe,
You wrote a great, you've got a Substack. What do you call it? A blog. And I remember my favorite blogs that you wrote was about safety versus freedom.
Yeah.
Is that something you've learned on this trip?
It's funny because it's almost like we've been on this journey of like observing and, pondering things. And when we were out watching these dolphins in the wild, and there was hundreds of them just jumping out of the water and doing flips and spins in the air. And Tom and I thought about, we were talking later about how there's dolphins in captivity, and we'd even gone to a zoo and, an aquarium and seen them. And they're told, okay, now you do a trick. I have this fish for you here. If you do this trick, and it's completely different. These ones in the wild are doing it out of joy and relishing in their freedom. And
they're in danger. There's sharks
and
there's dangers in the ocean, but yet they seem so much happier, even amidst those dangers. Having that freedom to do what they want. And they're putting on this incredible like acrobatic display for us. We're out on a boat off the coast of Puerto Escondido in Oaxaca, Mexico. And we went way out there, and this boat operator just took us out into this middle of the ocean, and there was hundreds of dolphins everywhere we looked. It was like surreal. It was hard to even put into words what an incredible experience it was. But yeah, it was a powerful experience for both of us. And
that's what inspired my blog, because
really. So you're seeing things that are you're looking at the world through a different lens now.
Yeah.
That's not something you would have noticed before. Like if you'd have gone to SeaWorld in Toronto or something, you wouldn't have looked at that and gone, I'm a caged animal. Or, like...
No, I didn't see it that way nearly as much as I do now.
What are the other big lessons you've learned then that you might have, or what are your favorite things you've written about? Because you're writing blogs, it's about once a month, is it? Or once
every few weeks I try to.
Why'd you start that? Why'd you start that, first of all? Why did you start blogging?
I felt like putting pictures on Facebook is giving one side of a story. Like we had just spent, this is when I really had my aha moment, was coming down from a beautiful waterfall in Mexico. It's called El Chiflón, and it's
Chiapas.
In Chiapas. And it was just majestic and amazing. We took some family photos in front of this waterfall. And as we're walking back down the hill, I thought to myself, we just spent the last 2 weeks being so sick we couldn't even leave the house. Multiple times a day and night, we were running to the bathroom with our kids. And here I am posting pictures of us in front of a waterfall. I want to tell the world what's actually happening behind the scenes. Right. I don't want to just give one side of the story. I feel like that's fake.
Yeah, people think you're on this this incredible vacation. All you do is take beautiful photos and sit on the beach.
And I'd have these comments on my pictures like, you're living the dream. And I thought, you wouldn't dream of being sick for 2 weeks with a parasite. Like, let's be honest.
You should put some pictures of that on Facebook.
Yeah. Nobody wants to see those pictures, But at the same time, people want to read about it. People want to read about raw, honest experiences. Because I know I do. I feel like, I'm not the only one struggling when I read about other people's struggles. So that's what inspired me to write. And I'd already been pondering having, a blog of some sort. But that was kind of the idea of my first blog post was, let's be honest. Like, let's not sugarcoat all this stuff and put our best face on these pictures on Facebook. But let's tell an honest story.
And what was the feedback that you got from that first post?
Oh, I got some really, really good feedback, actually. A couple of really long emails from actually teachers of the girls from the past. But a couple women they're actually sisters, and they both emailed me. They had both been involved in our girls' education, and they were both very touched, about what I was saying and what we were going through. And and, you know, saying we missed you, but we're excited that you're on this journey, and we appreciate you being so honest. You know, we appreciate you telling your true story. And just getting that kind of feedback really inspired me to keep going with it, you know, and keep talking about things that I had been pondering and the honest, hard stuff we were going through. And one of the biggest, you know, I feel like one big thing is the language barrier. You know, you can't just walk up to someone and become a good friend within a week or two when you have a language barrier. And, you know, and there's so many different aspects of this trip, but yeah. Go ahead.
What would your message be to someone else who might wander into this same situation? What would be the thing that you wish you'd known before you came?
Before we started traveling?
Yeah, or, you know, I know you're kind of forced to do this, but there must be people out there who are thinking about these things.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've done a pretty extreme thing as far as your average person goes.
Yeah.
Have you learned anything quite fundamental that you look back and say, wow?
Well, I can think off the top of my head of one practical thing you should do is try to get some credit cards that don't cost you a lot
Right.
to use.
Have you sorted that out now?
We have now, yes.
Right.
Yeah, our trip back to Canada had some benefits in that way. But there's actually quite a few people who reach out to me or us asking about our experience because they're curious. There's many Canadians I know who are thinking about leaving, but they're scared or their spouse doesn't want to. They're afraid, you know, they don't want to leave family, or they're not sure if they can find work. There's a lot of fear. I mean, when we were leaving, there's a lot of people who thought, like, how could you go to Mexico? Like, it's so dangerous. There's drug cartels. And then we came to El Salvador, and before we were leaving, even people in Mexico were saying, oh, it's so dangerous in El Salvador, the gangs. And to be honest, you know, we've been almost a year gone, like in Mexico and El Salvador, and we've never had a dangerous experience other than, you know, scorpions or tarantulas. But we, like, nothing, crime, nothing like that. So one thing I would say is, it's not that scary. We were very scared, even though we'd been to Central America, scared to bring our kids here. And it really, like, the local people are wonderful and welcoming. And there's a few scammers here and there. You might get a cab driver who overcharges you or things like that. But for the most part, like, we've met such helpful, great people who want to help you. They want, even here, like, who want to help you settle in. They're excited to see foreigners coming to their country, and it's a change for them. They're used to people leaving, fleeing the country. And so to see people coming to where they're from, I think there's a pride for them.
You literally get people coming up and shaking your hand here in San Salvador, shouting across the street, "Hi, welcome to El Salvador."
Yeah.
We did have that at the
I
grocery
had,
store.
even the other day, at the dollar store, a random young guy. I heard him speaking English, and I asked him where he was from. He said, "Oh, I grew up in the States, but I'm living here now." And then he asked, you know, what we're doing here. And I said, oh, we moved here from Canada, like what's going on with the government. And he said, well, welcome to El Salvador.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, when we left here, we flew to Miami. And when we first came here, it was just when Bukele had instigated the, what was it called? What do they call it?
State of emergency.
A state of emergency, yeah.
Yeah.
And
we came at the same time.
I even remember, like, as soon as that happened, I reached out to some friends here and I said, what's all this about? And everyone said, you know, gave me the lowdown, which obviously turned out to be true. It's like, no, you know, you don't have to worry about that. But interestingly, when we left, we went to Miami, and some friends had booked us a hotel in Miami because they said, oh, you check this place out. It's you know, it's not too expensive, but it's in Miami, you know, because we needed to spend one night there. And we arrived at the foyer of this place, and there was some drunk woman having an absolute slagging match with the concierge and screaming. And my kids, literally, I felt them grab hold of me, you know, like for the first time in the whole trip.
Yeah.
This had not happened.
They hadn't been scared in Mexico.
No,
of
course not. Not in the slightest. We, you know, and it was when we hit America that it was like, This is, and it's true because we traveled around America, and it's like it's a really full-on place compared to somewhere like this.
Yeah.
And it's a very common experience that the fear of coming to a place like this.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question that 5 years ago this was a very different country.
Yeah.
No question. But it's amazing how many people don't really understand what's going on here yet.
Yeah,
they haven't clocked that. Like even in America, our friends had a Salvadorian neighbor who said, "What the hell are they doing in El Salvador?" It's like, you know what I mean? Like,
if you look at the mainstream media coverage of what's happening down here, you can't really blame people for thinking that it's not great because they keep saying, "Oh, Bitcoin, El Salvador's Bitcoin experiment is failing," and they're running articles like this all the time. And they call Bukele a dictator, and here we came from democratic Canada, and we feel much more free living in El Salvador, where they accuse the president of being a dictator, and we. Yeah, so I mean, I would say to people, you have to come here to experience it.
Do you know what though? There's if anything does happen here though, Nick, there's going to be all the "I told you so" people. Is that something you think about? Like, because you can't trust anything really. Can you?
And we don't trust El Salvador. Like, I don't have this faith and belief in the government here that we can plan to be here for the rest of our lives or even the next 5 years. We don't know. We know there's complete uncertainty. We know that things could go wrong. We know that this government might not be in power for long, or that they might change course, and we're prepared to leave and go somewhere else. And so yeah, we are prepared to go anywhere. Like I said before, if we felt we were had a better situation in Africa or Europe or Asia, we'd be willing to move somewhere else. We're open to adventure.
Do you feel like you're braver to do that now because you've been through the process?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I feel like COVID actually, in some ways, taught us to be like ready for anything. In some ways, like you said, like what if shit hits the fan here, and things go downhill. It was almost like that in Canada too. Like if you're proven wrong, like we could have been proven wrong at some point.
But you're both considering investing in land and property here now, so you're taking it quite seriously. So
we are. It's so I'm of the mindset that don't trust, like don't put all your faith into this working out. But at the same time, we have kids. We want to raise our kids and live in a place that we like and build something, right? We don't want to. You could hodl your Bitcoin and wait, and for 20 years, and maybe it'll be worth $10 million a coin, and then you can live like a king. But in the meantime, you have 20 years, and that's your life, right? That's the best years of our lives that we have remaining. We're both near 40 years old, and we, so with this 40 to 60.
I'm halfway through it, dude.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
But so we know that this is the time to live, right? This is the time to build something, to create something, and to give our kids an incredible childhood and experience. So we would love to buy something and build something, build a home, build rental cabins, build gardens, grow fruit trees, all these kinds of things that we dream of doing.
Do you think the kids are like what I noticed yesterday is, when we went up to look at that plot of land, your kids were like pulling things off trees and saying, "Look at this! There's a coffee bean," or "Look at this thing down here. Like, when you press it, the putri malo we call it. I don't know what you call it here, but that plant that sort of retracts when you touch it, and so they're obviously learning new things and different things here. You're homeschooling them, right?
Yeah.
And you plan to homeschool for forever?
We don't know. I mean, we would gladly join a school of expat kids if there was one.
If we felt it was a good fit.
Maybe we'll even start one.
We've heard about different options. We met some people who were involved in the free school and Escuela Libre in El Zonte. So we're curious to check it out, and we're interested in doing things where it's like 1 day a week. 1 day a week, go.
The girls are in gymnastics.
Sounds like the perfect school.
Yeah.
1 day a week.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of hooking up with other families. Like we were talking about this yesterday when we were out and about. I think if it had transpired that I would be living here, I would have thought, hey, let's rent a massive house and coexist in that house. And what a great place to experiment with education in that sense. So you've got even 3 families. Imagine if you had 3 families living in a ginormous place. You pool all your money together. You get what a life. I mean, we're almost going back to the way it was, 100,000 years ago. It's like it's that movement,
communal
back.
living.
Yeah. But there was a reason. I mean, you could argue that's the way we've evolved as humans. That as actually probably the most natural way we would be in a group of, say, 50 people. And like your kids get looked after by everyone. You don't have to, you don't isolate yourself in this small family unit. You're part of a greater,
Yeah.
And there are enough Bitcoiners and people with open minds here to probably think about things like that, and it's in the most simplest form is, instead of you homeschooling just your kids, you homeschool another family's kids at the same time.
Yeah.
And then you do it because as we all know now, because from homeschooling, you don't need to homeschool much.
Right.
You don't need to do it 6 hours a day or for 5 days a week or whatever it is at school. That system is a terrible way to educate your kids. We did it 1 hour a day if they were lucky, and we had whole months where we forgot because we were having so much fun to do it. And when they got back to school, they were way ahead. So it's obviously, it's obviously a if not a viable alternative. I'm not going to say it's a better system, because some people like schools because it means they can leave their kids alone for,
and there's so many different schools, different types of schools, that you can't paint them all with the same brush.
Yes.
But
exactly.
Even the one we had our kids in, like 6 or 7 hours a day, they're there. I have a friend that was volunteering or working there as an EA, education assistant, and she said it's disturbingly amazing to me how little they're actually teaching these kids.
And it was actually a great school.
How little time they're actually spending learning.
But it was a great school, and we loved it. But so we were sad to pull our kids out of the school. We had great friends. We loved the teachers. Our kids loved being there. We shared the values of the school, and so, it's funny to hear that, because it was considered maybe the best school in the city by a lot of people.
Kindergartners learn how to read there. They don't in the other schools in that town at all.
But yet, even in a school that good, the kids were still not spending that much time learning. And so you're there for 6-7 hours, and, a lot of it's playtime, a lot of it's lunchtime, a lot of it's this and that. And we realized, okay, in a couple of hours at home, you could kind of teach the same amount of curriculum.
I don't even think it's 2 hours.
Yeah.
I think you do 1 hour first thing in the morning when they're fresh, and then you just stop, and you don't start again until the next day, and you make sure that whatever you were teaching them the day before, they understand.
Yeah.
I'm talking about maths mainly, because that was what I was doing. But the rest of the time is so important that you just let them do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because our kids, because they didn't have any toys with them, really, the main thing they had, and I see it's the same with you here, it's all pieces of paper and pens and it's like craft stuff. Yeah. They would be doing that as soon as they were bored with swimming in the pool that day, which is the other thing they did all the time, was just swim either
Ours
in the sea.
too here.
Right. As soon as that was over, they'd naturally just get out whatever they had at their disposal, which was drawing or creating things, which is kind of what they do at school as well. Except at school, they tell you to do it. They say, build this thing out of cardboard, and you end up doing it at home. Yeah. They bring it home and they say, Mum, Dad, we've got to build a castle. So you're like, okay, I'll be there in a minute. And then by the end of it, it's your castle, isn't it? It's not their castle.
Yeah. But and our kids have even been writing their own books, and I consider that one of the best ways for them to practice their writing and printing and spelling.
Yeah, it's fun. They just get inspired. I want to write a book about butterflies or dogs or whatever. Cats. And then that's their writing assignment, or that's how they learn to write. We say, what do you want to say about dogs?
That is the essence of is it called self-directed learning? My experience of, in inverted commas, self-directed learning was it just happened. That's actually just natural. You don't even need to call it anything. You don't have to train yourself to teach your kids to self-directed learning. I've talked with Daniel about this a lot. it's like you see what your kids are doing when left to their own devices, and you just kind of like push that along a bit and and open up opportunities in that realm. And so you're happy. What do you think the pitfalls of your kids growing up like this are?
Well, they've yet to develop any close friendships. So one thing Emily touched on earlier was, our first year after leaving Canada was spent jumping around, adventuring, exploring, which was great. It was fun, but we never spent more than a month in a single place. And so kids would make friends with kids staying in the same neighborhood and play together for a couple of weeks. Like we did with your family. We spent a few weeks together and our kids bonded and we spent a lot of time together and it was fantastic. But then families move on and we move or they move and then you move to a new place and those friends are gone. And so now you're starting from scratch again. And so one thing I would say, I'm not touching on the pitfalls, but here I wanted to say that our girls are so close. They used to fight a lot. And we couldn't believe how many people in Canada told us, your kids get along so well. I can't believe how well they get along. Just in the 7 weeks.
We get the same, exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and I think it's because of the fact that they are forced to play with each other because they go have so much time where they don't have other friends and they've learned to get along so well. And it's beautiful to see. And I went through a similar experience when I was 12. My family moved from Canada to Finland. We lived there for 14 months and my sister and I didn't really have any friends and we became each other's best friend. And I actually talked about this in my wedding speech when we were in Canada about how it was that experience that really bonded us and, kind of built a bond for life. And I see that happening with my own girls now, our girls now, and they're developing that kind of bond that I think will stick with them for the rest of their lives. And so even though they haven't made any really good friends yet, we know a few expat families who have kids around their age that we're starting to become friends with, which is great. But even with the lack of strong friendships, I think the bonds between sisters are so powerful, and I'm really excited about that. So I think the benefits outweigh the drawbacks in that regard.
Are your family disappointed that you're not around?
I know my parents are. So there's only myself and my sister, two kids on my parents' side, and we're the only ones with kids. So we took all three of their grandchildren away. Mm-hmm. And so I know my mom's heartbroken. I believe my dad doesn't show emotion as much in that way, but I think he's heartbroken as well.
Yes.
And I know they wish we were close, but they fully understand and support. And Emily's parents are very supportive and understanding of why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. At the same time, like my mom was practically bawling when we left this last time. And I talk to her regularly, but I was also thinking my brother has two girls who are about the same ages as our older girls, and they used to spend time together quite regularly because we lived in the same city. So, there's those things that you miss, right? Those regular visits and friendships and cousin bonds and, so they do talk on the phone occasionally on a video call with their cousins or their friends, but it's quite few and far between those things. And
but you must ask yourself, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, that you must be asking yourself, what is the point of life? Like, what is the point of life?
Yeah.
And one of the answers to that question is family. There's no question about that. Mostly, I think it's like your immediate family, as in your own children. But it is also about the extended family, and this does give huge meaning to your life, doesn't it? The question is, like, would you go against your morals for that? And why not? Mm-hmm. Why not just take a vaccination that probably not going to hurt you? I mean, it can. We know that it can, but statistically, it's probably not going to hurt you. But it's a moral stance, the vaccine thing, isn't it? It's not necessarily
it's a bit of both, but
it's both.
But we've asked ourselves that many times in the last couple of years. The question of, okay, well, what if we just complied? What if we just went along? Life would be so much easier in so many senses. It really would.
Mm-hmm. We had a great life in Canada. We were very happy.
I'd still be working my job. We'd still have 2 vehicles, our kids in a private school. All those things that we loved, are all friendships and family members and all those supports around us, we'd still have all those things. Our kids wouldn't have the same experiences, and neither would we. You know, they wouldn't be learning Spanish. They wouldn't have traveled all over Mexico this past year. And that was always a dream, you know, that we had really wanted our kids to travel, and we kept putting it off because it's like, well, we have kids in diapers. Let's wait till they're out of diapers.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now they're in school. And
we need
now
to save more money. Or
we have a house now, and
works.
there's always a reason not to go.
Yeah.
But
So
we
go on
almost
then.
had to have that push, you know?
If you imagine yourself, imagine you'd complied.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you a different person? Are you somehow like a dumbed down version of yourself? You must feel much more vital now. Like,
I love this question. I love this question because, yeah. Oh, it's funny. I would have never thought to ask this question to someone or even of myself, but it's funny to think about because, like I mentioned earlier, like it's when we were talking about the ArriveCan stuff and not complying at the airport, I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror. And that for me is the biggest thing. And I would feel like a shell of a man if I were to just be like, okay, I just have to do what I'm told so that my kids can, you know, go to their school and do their activities and we can just live a normal life. I just have to comply with whatever we're told to do. And I think I know where that path leads, right? Like we think that our actions don't have a big impact in the world, right? We think that it's just the world's going this way. All we can do is kind of just go along with the flow. A lot of people think that way. But I really do believe that it's these little actions that each one of us do that lead us down that path. And you know, I'm a big fan of like Jordan Peterson, and he's talks a lot about Alexander Solzhenitsyn, you know, the famous Russian writer who wrote about his experience in the gulags. And I've read A Gulag Archipelago, Volume 1, and most of Volume 2. It's a big book. I listened to the audiobook, so I'm lying when I say I read it.
Oh, that's
I used to listen to it when I was
cheating.
driving. But yeah, he talks a lot about, you know, if people would have just spoken up, right? People would have just stopped it early. They could have prevented it, but people just went along with it. And I think about that often, about where is our society heading if people just go along with it, right? And I see it heading to a dark place, like you touched on with central bank digital currency, social credit score. And I see a version of that existing in China, and, you know, like where they can just turn your QR code red if you're doing something they don't want you to do. And they can do it for reasons completely unrelated to COVID. So even if you believe the COVID narrative and that it's so dangerous that we need to protect people and we need to have these passport systems, governments, once they have that power, they can abuse it to no end. And they can say, did you post something, you know, anti-government on Facebook? Turn off your QR code. Once a person has that absolute power and control, it can be abused so much. And so I don't want my kids to grow up and inherit a world like that. And so I think it's so important for each of us to do everything we can to resist that. And I heard someone say, I can't remember who this was, but that I want to leave my kids a world that they have at least the same freedoms that we have. Bare minimum, right? Ideally, even more.
Yeah.
But I don't want to leave the world worse than what we grew up in.
And it's already much worse than how we grew up. The school systems and...
Yeah, but so to answer your question, to go back to what you said about like, could we, you know, just comply? And no, I feel like I'd rather be dead. I honestly do. I feel like I'd rather be dead than just going along with what they're telling us to do.
All right, what about this then? Because there's two ways of looking at this as a father, and I am a father.
Yeah.
There's compliance could also be seen as a sacrifice that you make for your kids.
Yes. Yeah. I know a lot of people justify it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've thought about that too, because we've talked through different scenarios. Emily and I have discussed this, like what would happen if they were we both said, okay, if they're going to take our kids away, and if it came down to it, but we had no choice, we couldn't feed our kids. You get to a point where you're making pretty hard decisions, right? And we both said we would do all kinds of things. We'd get a fake vaccine pass. if we had to. We've chosen to avoid that. We've chosen to do everything legitimately, but we would be willing to do that if it came down to it. We'd be willing to do other things that might require breaking the law to survive in that kind of a system, where if that was your only choice. Because so first off, yes, we will do whatever it takes to keep our kids and to raise them well and to look after them, provide for them. And so there, you're right. There is a point where you have to decide, right? Maybe you don't have a choice. Maybe you need to comply for your children.
Well, it's tough being a parent because you are leading 3 people down a path.
Yes.
And they have absolutely, they do everything you say. They follow you. They trust you. That
Exactly.
And I think probably, Emily, your perspective is slightly different on that. Is it that because I think that would be the case in my relationship. Liz would feel very differently about putting the kids at, in inverted commas, risk or bringing them to a place where the option to not come was very easy, and all you had to do was give up one of your morals.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't be here if I wasn't married to Tom. Like, had I chosen a different husband who wanted to comply, maybe I would have just gotten the vaccine. I feel like who you're married to, at least for me, really affects some of your decisions.
Sure.
But
interestingly,
at the same time, I always had this burning hunger to take my kids and show them how most of the world lives, because I had been to Africa, India, Philippines in my 20s, and I saw these happy kids. They didn't have anything. They barely had food in their stomachs, but they were way happier than the kids in Canada, and so were their parents most of the time. And I just had this burning hunger to take our kids and to go somewhere and show them this is how most kids in the world live. Stop complaining about not getting enough time on your computer or whatever, not getting the food you wanted exactly how it was at lunchtime. And, it's just, for me, that's the biggest part of this that feels like it's fulfilling a dream for me.
Well, interestingly, you mentioned that if you weren't married to Tom, you might not be here. But Tom recounted a story earlier where basically it was you that said, right, we're going.
Yeah.
And I know that experience. And I think this is something that a lot of women don't know about men, is that we are looking for a partner in crime to do this thing. There's no way we would ever.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in that situation myself. I'd love to be here. I think the opportunities here are phenomenal. I think my kids would benefit. I think I would benefit. I think Liz would benefit. But Liz isn't happy doing that. So we're not doing it.
Yeah.
We don't live in a world where I get to lead my family to where I want. I'm adamant that I want us to do that thing.
Right.
And Tom, you described it earlier. You were confused. Frozen. Until the point where you said, we need to go.
I needed that. Yeah. I needed her to say, it's okay. I'm not going to hold you responsible if things go wrong, Like, it was like she lifted this huge weight off my shoulders, because I felt like I was carrying this huge weight of, this is all my fault if this goes wrong. If this is a bad decision, if we regret selling our house, if we regret pulling our kids out of school, if we regret any of this, if something goes wrong and we, are victims of crime or whatever, I'm going to be blamed. And not just Emily, but her parents, her family, like everybody's going to blame me. That it was I dragged her into this. And it was like when she said, we need to go, we need to do this, I felt like that whole weight was lifted off my shoulders. And I said, we're in this together, right? This is our decision. We made this decision together.
Which is it's super powerful.
It was, yeah.
It's the only thing necessary, I think, in any decision in a partnership. If you have the power of the two main protagonists, it's not multiplied by 2, it's multiplied by 1,000.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's amazing just the focus it gave me, and I think both of us, once Emily had that talk with me and I felt like that weight gone, it was just like, okay, I know what I need to do. Call the realtor, book the plane tickets, get everything lined up. It was just stuff started happening. It was incredible how quickly, within 3 weeks, everything happened. And it was, I'd just been paralyzed before that, like not doing anything. And feeling like I couldn't. And it's just incredible when you have, that common goal or common vision.
Well, also, I think we're good at sorting out problems, but we can't sort them out, on certain levels. On the practical level, we can book plane tickets, we can, we can sell our house, we can buy a car, we can do all this kind of stuff. But on an emotional level, we can try and convince you why it's a good idea. But you tend to go to your female friends for the support network in making these decisions. It's just a fact, I know that myself, it's one of the dynamics we live in, and it's not right or wrong. It just is.
Yeah. I'm curious if Emily, did you go to any female friends like when you were considering this? Or?
I don't remember. I definitely was talking about, like, even before I came to you and said we need to leave, I was talking about it with my coworkers, with different people. And I even had a coworker say to me, my husband wants to go to Mexico. We've been talking about going to Mexico too, because we don't agree with what's happening. So there was a bit of, back and forth. But I don't feel like I really confided. Like, I felt like it all happened so fast that I just, maybe a little bit with my mom. But
I feel like I remember a lot of Canadians, a lot of people we knew saying things like, "Oh, I want to leave too. I would totally leave if I could." But I think it was more this like mindset of, "Oh, the grass must be greener on the other side," And it's an easy thing to say without taking any practical steps towards it. So there's a lot of people that say, "Oh yeah, I would get out of here if I could," and so, but there was very few people that we knew that were really serious about it. And I was very serious. Like I was talking to people on the ground in these places and trying to take those practical steps and figuring out what it would take.
It looks like Little House on the Prairie's ended.
Yeah.
We've been talking for 2 hours, 20 minutes. Oh, I really want to carry on.
It's flown by.
I want to carry on, but if they become too chatterboxy, we should probably knock it on the head. But
probably hungry.
Are they?
Oh, we can go a little bit longer. Maybe we'll make them breakfast in a bit.
It's 5 to 10.
Why don't you let them have a banana? 3 bananas.
But okay, so that's interesting because I think the decision making in an endeavor like this is hugely complicated and important. And do you find that each one of you have your strong points, or do you feel you meet in the middle, or do you feel you meet at one or other's level?
For some things, I mean, Tom's definitely really good at like seeking out adventure and planning things like for us to do, like we're gonna go hike a volcano tomorrow, or we're gonna go see these ruins. And so in Mexico we did a lot of adventures, and I would say 90% of the time he was the one organizing and planning that stuff, and I really appreciate that about him. I'm kind of hands-on, get the kids sorted, feed them, clothe them, bathe them.
Yeah, I would say like organization and planning are my strong points. Like I handle most of the financial stuff. I handle the bookings of Airbnbs and transportation and residency applications and all this kind of stuff. And I'm an accountant. I'm used to, like making sure all the numbers are in the right boxes and the right boxes are checked. So I feel like that's a strong point for me, and I don't mind doing it. So
probably worth mentioning that that's how you're making a living still.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people probably wonder, how do you live in El Salvador?
Yeah, that's been a huge blessing, because when we left Canada, Tom's work, his job that employed him, actually told him, no, we don't want you working out of Mexico.
So we left with no income. So that's something to keep in mind, that we didn't have income lined up. We did not have, like the perfect situation. A lot of people say, oh, I couldn't leave because I couldn't make an income. I couldn't work. We had both lost our jobs when we left Canada, and I was fortunate. I fully admit that I'm very fortunate that I have a skill that, can be done remotely. And my employer contacted me 6 weeks after we left and said, could you please come back and help us out as a consultant? Because they wouldn't let me work as an employee due to their certain
Was that
policies.
them realizing you were indisposable, or is it just a bit of luck?
It was luck because they had 2 accountants quit in the meantime, in the month since we left. They just a turnover all of a sudden kind of happened, and I had been an integral part of some things there, and with one of those key people leaving, they were sort of the only other person that could do it. And because of that, I think it would have been very difficult for them without me there. So yeah, it was kind of right place, right time, and worked out lucky. And I'm still working for them. I don't have any certainty as for how long that will be, but I suspect I have a bit of a future with them, at least 6 months.
Have you got a long-term plan then with that regard? In that regard?
No, I don't. Yeah, we have very few long-term plans these days, but I guess just a belief that we can make it work. That's sort of what it is that, that's why we're willing to look at buying land and get residency here, because, even if I were to lose that contract for consulting work, I just believe that I'd find something else.
Well, it's funny. I think there's a lot of opportunities here, bizarrely, for anyone. Like, I've noticed that in just talking to people. Like we were on the beach yesterday looking up at that house that was for sale, and I was thinking, oh yeah, that would be good. And then you think, oh, who do I go to procure that house? Yeah. Fortunately, we know. I could pop down the lane. I could talk to some Popo, for example, and say, who owns that house? Yeah. It's derelict. And he'd be able to tell me. And but most people don't. And there's an opportunity there already.
Yeah.
To start a business doing things like that, for example.
I had someone actually ask me if I wanted to sell real estate. I have a real estate agent here.
Really?
Yeah, because they know that I speak some Spanish, I speak English, I'm connected to some of the Bitcoin community, and I'm, pretty good with numbers and financial stuff. So yeah, so maybe there's an opportunity, but I do believe that opportunities come when you're willing and open to them. Open to trying something different, and I am, right? I'm not dead set on doing anything. I'm looking. I want to do something that sort of furthers the cause of freedom in the world, and which is, I love what you're doing with the Free Cities initiative. That's super exciting.
What about you, Emily? Then, what do you think? What's your long-term plan, if any?
Well, I do want to help. Like, I feel like El Salvador has some needs in the areas of helping vulnerable women and children. And so I do want to explore like what I could do in that regard, not necessarily to be paid for it, but possibly in the future sometime. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of women in situations where, they find themselves pregnant, for example, and what kind of supports do they have? Sometimes they don't have any, and even someone to come along and say, I'll help you. I'll give you some maternity clothes. I'll help you with the baby or whatever, and that's something that has always sort of been on my heart when I traveled in Africa and India too. In India, for example, I was only 20 years old and someone handed me her baby and said, take it home. Like, she just could not afford to feed this baby. She already had 3 children and she was probably only 21. And, I think that there's probably a lot of needs, that we could help fill here. We could come along alongside locals and help them find a good income, for example, even if they just learn some English and some computer skills. And
yeah, there's some great stuff happening in that regard, like with Hope House and El Zante. Love what they're doing. They're teaching computer skills and English and all kinds of life skills to kids. And we started taking our kids to their surf program for kids, and we're a little bit connected with people there. And so, yeah, getting involved with initiatives like that.
Would you ever start working as a nurse again? I mean, it must have occurred to you that you could, because nursing's a skill you can take anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, it occurs to me occasionally.
Maybe, you've got a lot on your plate.
I think that my job in Canada was probably a lot better paying than it would be if I got the same sort of job here.
Sure, but the standard of living, the cost of living is cheaper here, right? It is?
In some ways.
But we talked
Some
to
things
taxi drivers that were trained to be nurse. Well, one, for example, that was a trained RN, and he said it's a lot better paying to be a taxi driver than to work as a nurse for him.
That was in Mexico.
In Mexico, yeah.
Maybe,
And
maybe you should consider that then.
Yeah.
so yeah,
Exactly.
You can drive, can't you?
yeah. I don't know. At this point,
No, I'm just thinking.
something online might be a good option.
I'm
but-
thinking about somebody, I forget who it is, on Bitcoin Twitter has started a dental clinic in El
Oh,
Salvador.
that's right. Yeah. I've been following that.
And she's I'm going to guess, an American. Is it a dentition? What do you call it?
Dentist.
Dentist. Yeah, whatever. Dentition. There's there's ways to do it without thinking about whether you're getting paid or not.
Yeah. And I would totally do something in related to healthcare. And in fact, I did some outreaches to Africa and the Philippines related with healthcare. Before I even became a trained nurse, I had just taken some primary healthcare courses. And so that is something that really interests me, because some people don't necessarily have access or the funds to go, seek out a hospital or a clinic, and they live very remotely. So that's something that I did in the Philippines and I would really enjoy doing. So something to think about.
I'm gonna end it soon, but I want to ask you one last question, both of you. I want to say something along the lines of this: if you could snap your fingers right now, and everything could be okay, everything could be the way you wanted it to be, or you want it to be, and that means even you could be back living your old life. COVID had never happened. It could be absolutely anything. What would what would it be?
Huh.
If I could snap my fingers and have anything happen?
Yeah. You could change anything about this crazy journey you've been on. And that includes it not even starting.
Well, I'll go on a bit of a rabbit trail before I answer the question. Is I often think about that question of, would I want to go back, right? As if nothing had happened. And I wouldn't, honestly. And it's so funny because I'm almost grateful for all the bad stuff that's happened, all the craziness and the people who discriminate against us and wished harm on us, because it led us to pursue this adventure as a family that we'd always wanted to do and were too scared to begin. And we just got that push. It was like, you have no choice. and because we started it now it's no longer scary. And so, like you had asked Emily before, like, would it be easier to go somewhere else in the world now after having this experience? Yeah, 100%. It'd be, yeah, I guess. So I've been thinking about your question now as I ramble on. And I mean, if I could snap my fingers and have anything, I would want to be able to live in a free place, like what I envision El Salvador could become, as sort of a beacon for the rest of the world, as to like, this is what could be possible, right? If we embrace freedom, stop fighting about enforcing our view of the world onto other people, and just say, let's give people the freedom to pursue the life they want for their families, give them, a safe place to live in terms of like what they're doing here in terms of reducing crime, so that you don't have to feel like your family's in danger. You can live in a place where you feel secure and you're free to pursue the life that you want. That is what I want. And then ideally, like, the freedom to travel around the world, to see other parts of the world. I would love for us to be able to go to South America and Europe and see a lot of these incredible initiatives that are happening. Like at the Bitcoin conference, it was so cool to see the people presenting from the Philippines and Costa Rica, Guatemala, South Africa, where they're building these sort of communities that are using Bitcoin as currency, that were inspired by what happened here with Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador. I'd love to be able to go and have like a network of freedom communities around the world and travel from one to the other. Yeah, I just want to see freedom flourish, in the world and be a part of that, somehow furthering that, I guess.
What about you, Emily?
I think if I could snap my fingers and have, life, the perfect life, not that would ever happen, but to have things better than they are, I could envision like having a freedom-minded community that provided jobs for all of our friends and family that want to get out of Canada. You know what I mean? So that all these people that their main excuse is, well, I don't have a way to support my family or to have an income in El Salvador or wherever I want to go. I feel like if we could help make a way for that to happen, whether it's online or on the ground or whatever, that we would have, we would have an even bigger freedom community of all these people, like, multiple families back home that would leave Canada if it wasn't for their job, their job security, that kind of thing. Whereas if we had a community where we had a school, English-speaking school for these kids, these families' kids, and things like that. I was just envisioning that when you were talking and thinking, we have all these people that we know that would love to get out of Canada.
And not just Canada.
And Australia.
Other parts of the world, Europe.
Yeah, Europe. And, even in Germany and different places, you can't homeschool your kids.
It's illegal.
So many people would
Sweden,
gladly
even.
come here if they knew they could support their family and privately school their kids and, have freedom.
Well, I think that's a good ideal. You've got something else to say, Tom?
Before you close, I just wanted to mention, you asked earlier about what would we recommend to people wanting to make a similar jump or who are afraid. Start looking into residency and things like that before you leave.
Yeah.
Look into it, because we wish we had known. We wish we had known that, in Mexico, you have to apply for residency from your home country or from abroad. It made things a lot more difficult for us that we didn't have time and we didn't look into that. So I would just say, if you're curious, start looking into that and start thinking of a plan B. Start thinking of a second residency, a place to plant a flag. Just start doing the research now before the next crisis hits.
And start learning another language, even if it's only for 10 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Well, maybe then we should say where people can get hold of you then, because you're a fountain of knowledge and you're very open to talking to people. Tom, you're at Prison Planet.
No, it's
on
actually
Twitter,
it's at Men's Coach Tom.
Oh, right, yeah.
My past life as a men's coach. We didn't go into that, but
Men's Coach Tom. T-O-M, not
T-O-M.
T-O. Right.
Yeah.
And Emily, your Substack is?
It's Life Lessons from Abroad.
All one word. Life Lessons.
No, there's space.
There's separate words, yeah.
Life Lessons from Abroad. So if someone Googles Life Lessons from Abroad, do you think you'll pop up?
On Substack.
Oh, on Substack alone.
Yeah,
okay.
And you're on Twitter too.
I'm on
Very
Twitter.
active. Yeah.
You never
I don't know what
tweet.
my at is.
No.
I've never seen you tweet. And you're right.
She barely uses.
I do sometimes.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Cool.
But certainly, if anyone's at all interested in, making that move, I think you'd be great people to speak to. And I personally, I'm super happy to know you, and I'm super inspired by what you're doing. I think your dynamic and the way you're doing it is very inspiring for me. So I'm sure other people will find that too. And the other thing to say is, I'm a big believer in El Salvador as well. I think it's there are a number of people down here who know what's going on here, who can see it on the ground. And I think a lot of people would be surprised if they discovered that for themselves firsthand. So thanks for talking. Anyway, that's been a great conversation. And
Before you shut it off, I just want to say thank you for the kind words, and it's been a pleasure meeting your family, and it's awesome having you here stay with us, and I look forward to your family visiting again. We were just very privileged to meet you, all of you, and to be able to bond with you and Liz and your kids, and you were some of the very best friends we made in our entire year abroad, year journey, traveling.
Yeah, me too. I'm sad to be here alone. I'm here for the Bitcoin conference in San Salvador, and I'm only here for 10 days. But this second trip for me to El Salvador has cemented in my mind that I am going to bring us all back, my whole family back, for another month or two or whatever, as a bona fide, we're doing this thing. We ended up here by default before because I'm a Bitcoiner and I had to come to the place where they legalized Bitcoin as legal tender. But now it's something different. Now it's like the people Bitcoin's not the draw anymore. I use Bitcoin every day here. It's no longer a novelty, but the people that are here are still a massive novelty to me. I think it's an awesome group of people amassing down here. So. Great. Well, look, the kids are back as well. Perfect timing.
Thanks for
a
this,
lot.
Tim.
Okay,
Cheers.
thanks, Tim.
Thanks.